Would you care to step outside?
Superman!
I mean, get in! In the White House, I've been cleaning for months.
Welcome again. This is episode 2 of the Comics in Motion podcast. I'm your host, Chris Phelps, and my co-host is Mr. Dave Horrocks.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good stuff, Dave. Yeah, since last week, we've had our first review up of Superman, and we've had a great reception, to be fair. The social media's grown a lot of attention. We've been throwing out some fun facts around the film, which is, had a lot of sort of asking us questions, retweets, and gaining us a lot of followers, which is quite surprising in our first week and our first review. So I'm really pleased with that, Dave.
Yeah, it's really good, and I've been sort of keeping the eye on the download numbers as well. And again, launched a podcast, and they're probably a bit higher than what I was expecting initially. So yeah, it's all been really, really positive for this first week.
Yeah, it's been really good, and I think we chose quite a good film. And listening back, and we've both listened, obviously, a couple of times to the actual podcast, and I've tried hard to critique it, and I'm not sort of blowing our own trumpet, but I think what we did and the way we reviewed it was very, very good, to be fair. And I just thought that we would carry on doing that, which I'm sure we will. I think the way we sort of went scene by scene was something I've not actually heard in other podcasts, and I'm not, I listen to a lot of good podcasts around the comic book superheroes, like yourself, obviously does a lot more than me, but I just think this format, is a good way for people who haven't seen the films, or even though it's a 30-year-old film, it's sort of a vested interest, and maybe they've avoided the film. It might give someone that sort of prick of enthusiasm to sort of go out there and watch it.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah,
and I think I messed up last week. I think I called it a 30-year-old film, and that's me forgetting how old I am. It's actually 40, isn't it? It's 40 years old.
I should know that because I'm 40 this year. I've just said the same thing. And yeah, that's true.
We just don't want to, acknowledge how old we are, I guess.
No, that's true, actually, Dave. Don't ruin it for me now, Dave. It's something better when he's 30.
It's when it gets to 50, it's like, oh, man.
Oh, no, you know what? It's so mad that you've said that, because I should know that I'm 40 this year. It's the year I was born. It was released, the first one. Oh, my.
Memory goes, Chris. That's the problem.
It is. And it's funny because, when we were reviewing it and obviously critiquing, what I'd like to sort of make clear to everyone is the way we're doing it is obviously very tongue-in-cheek and stuff, and we're picking out little tidbits that amused us and funny us. We're obviously not critiquing the film and stripping it back to bare bones, but I just feel in this day and age, with, as we've said, the saturation of superhero films and things like that, it's a massive genre of films now across the board. I just thought it was only right to sort of pick out, and obviously, like you said, he's 40 years old, so has it aged well? And in some respects, it had aged very well. In other respects, it hadn't, and that's obviously where the critique come. But it didn't take us away from what reviews we both give it, because we both enjoyed the film, and that sort of stands up well 40 years later. There's not many films who can do that, and you can actually sit there and watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really looking forward to tonight, to be honest, because I know that this is actually your favourite film. And yes. I think from me, you're going to get a little bit more of the same.
Yeah. Quite rightly, I think no, because it's true. It's a film for me that I've absolutely. This is the one where we had both. As I said, I used to watch him at my nan's, and Superman 2, and that's the one we're reviewing today, as we've announced this week, is the one that I just sat there and watched and watched and watched. And I even remember the video we had it on actually had a mark on it. And it was the one where you knew that was Superman 2. It got played that much. It had a marker where you used to write the name of the film. It was just an unbelievable film as a kid. And, and I'm really looking forward to what we've both picked up on, looking at it as adults again, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into the film, just want to say, I really want to thank, there's been a couple of reviews up there already. So we really do appreciate those 5-star reviews. It helps other people find the podcast. And just want to read out a couple that we've had so far. So, first one says, great first episode. Keep the content fresh. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for that. The second one was fabulous. I usually dislike these things. Interesting way to start it. What a great podcast. Not normally my thing. There we go again. But thoroughly enjoyed this. Have subscribed for future reviews. Thumbs up.
Great.
So thank you very much for that.
I tell you what, Dave, that says a lot, really, because in my own personal podcast, it took I don't know how long to get a few reviews. So maybe the fact that we're actually prepared with this one's making a big difference. But no, thank you to everyone who's listened. Even if you haven't put a review, we do appreciate any reviews going on, especially with the couple of podcasts you've got to go out now. If you're just sort of getting into our first podcast with this one, go back and listen to the first one because they're intertwined. And any review, critiques we accept. We've had some really positive comments across social media, so I can't thank everyone enough, really.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get into the movie, should we go through a bit of comics background?
Of course.
Okay, so when we discussed about doing Superman 2, obviously I'm not going to give a rendition of Superman again. I did that last week. My second thought, I mean, for me, this film is all about one person, and that is General Zod. So my first thought was to talk a little bit about Zod. Now, Zod actually came out in the Silver Age, so he came out around 1961. And actually, the way my thought process went, I thought, I've thought to myself, I've just used the term there, Silver Age. And part of the whole point of this podcast is I'm coming from a comics perspective, and Chris, you're coming more from the media perspective as well. So when I'm using terms like Silver Age, that's a little bit of I don't want to say cliquey, but any kind of subgroup that you have, you always come up with your own little language to help communicate with each other. So actually what I thought I'd do is probably elaborate just a bit on initially the Golden Age.
Yeah.
Or what's classed as that Golden Age. Now, I don't think I'm breaking any nerd rules here.
No.
I don't think I'm like a Penn and Teller sort of thing. I think it's just one of those natural consequences of people using a language to communicate to each other. So have a guess, Chris. Where do you think the Golden Age of comics actually started?
1950s.
Close. That's more Silver Age. So it actually, we've discussed one comic.
Yeah,
I'll give you a second go. There we go. So we'll try and build these things up a little bit.
Yeah.
So comics were around before that. But generally, with that Action Comics #1, that's generally considered to be the start of the golden age of comics, really around that superhero genre, really. And with some of these terms, they are quite hotly debated as well. Now, the start of the golden age, that's pretty certain. People accept, pretty much that's Action Comics #1. When it finishes is a bit more debatable, and then when the Silver Age starts, again, a bit more debatable. So, but generally, that's where we start off. So, Action Comics #1, and we talked last week about how popular that was, and how it captured the imagination. How the world's just going into a world war, so there's a thirst for these heroic kind of characters. So you saw a lot of comics and characters kind of spring up around that time. So we've talked about Superman. You also had Batman and Robin coming out. You had Green Lantern. You had Green Arrow, Aquaman. These are all around the detective comics. Yeah. Over at Timely Comics, and remember that name, Timely Comics, we had Captain America, the Submariner, and the Human Torch. And we also had a character, and this one is a little bit more convoluted, but it was fairly simple. But Captain Marvel over at Fawcett Comics.
Yeah.
So all of these characters started springing up, and a lot of the focus was really around fighting the Axis powers. Fighting the Japanese, fighting the German Nazi powers, and what have you. Now, everyone was loving it, in the 40s, in those early 40s. So from 1938 onwards, and then really it kind of declined throughout the kind of late 40s and early 50s. So that's, again, a bit debatable exactly where it happened, but that's kind of where that golden age finishes. And what I'd say is, if anyone listening, or yourself, Chris, if you've got a friend or a grandparent or something with one of those in their loft or in their garage, just be very nice to them. Because those are the expensive ones, because they really were disposable. And, it was the days, kids would have comics scrunched up in their back pockets. They used to swap them a lot. So that's why you don't have many of them around, because no one was buying them thinking, this will be worth quite a lot in the future years. So that's really the golden age. Now, with that decline, you saw more things like westerns, horror comics, romance comics, science fiction. And it wasn't till sort of 1956-ish onwards that you start getting into the Silver Age. And now I mentioned Timely Comics. That's basically, there was Timely, and then I think it was Atlas Comics. Yeah. And then in the early 60s, it became Marvel.
Right.
But essentially, we'll talk about Silver Age another time, but just wanted to go over the Golden Age there. Now, what I would say as well is I rattled off a few characters there at the start. So people like Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and then I think the Flash as well. What actually happened in the Silver Age, people started to want to have really more science-based characters. And Detective Comics, what they wanted to do is kind of park off. They wanted to forget about the Golden Age a little bit.
Yeah.
So they created an Earth 2. So they put like the old Green Lantern and the old Flash and whatever on that Earth 2. And then the new sandbox where they wanted to play was going to be Earth 1. And that early divergence, that little bit of complexity that they added in there, because they wanted to park one set of characters on a parallel Earth over here. Yeah. That would make life very, very difficult for them down the years. And so, again, I'm not going to go into that now. They've tried to remedy that, in recent years. But again, that's all for discussion another day.
No, it's very interesting, old Dave. Stuff I didn't know.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm here for.
No, honestly, we talked about this obviously away from the podcast, and the one thing I need to do as a point of reference anyway is actually read the comics or try and get hold of some of them online to sort of read the origins of some of the characters, and that obviously not just Superman, a lot of the other ones, Spider-Man and things like that. 'Cause obviously my forte is the sort of cartoons and films, the visual side of it. So to read it in sort of paper format is going to be quite interesting. I want to see if the how I perceive their characters' traits and personalities comes across in the comic, or if it comes across better in the comics, which most people say they do. So I'm quite interested how I'd see it, if that makes sense.
I'd almost, and I may possibly be lynched for this, but someone who's starting, I mean, I'm a little bit jealous as well, because actually we haven't discussed this. Possibly one of the things we might think about is if I can make certain recommendations, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that, on a reader. So if we do a particular movie and there's a it's based on a comic, I can point you in the direction of that comic. But what I was going to say is, I haven't put any thought into that, by the way. It just literally came to me now, so nothing prepared. What I was going to say is, you might be better starting off with digital.
Yeah.
So Marvel do a good offering. It's called Marvel Unlimited. It's a bit like Netflix for comics. So you don't own the comics as such. Or there's a way to do that. You can buy digital comics as well, but you can get access to a lot of their back catalogue just by paying a monthly or an annual subscription. And we're not sponsored by those guys yet. But that might be a place to start. Or Comixology is another good one, but that's not just based on Marvel. You could get your DC, you could get your Dark Horse, you can get Image, everything. So we'll discuss that offline.
Yeah.
And, maybe I can throw out lots and lots of recommendations, but we'll probably start off quite narrow, on what is it you're interested in reading up on.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Very good point. And I think... Sorry, Dave. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
No. And obviously this film and the last film that we've reviewed, there isn't actually comic book origins to it. So maybe when we get, just as we're talking about this out loud, is maybe as we get to that point, the comic book based on one that we're reviewing or one that's part of the film or something that happens afterwards or an origin of the way the character becomes who he is, like the Wolverine stuff and X-Men and you've got all sorts of things. But yeah, it's a good idea that. I think it would give me a bit more perspective on what I'm sort of watching and feeling when I'm doing these reviews.
A couple of points to that. So one of the other reasons not to talk about Zod is his origin is fair enough. It's fairly basic, but because Superman was supposed to be the last Kryptonian, the editors were basically trying to close off all those other characters that they created, so the Crypto the dog and whatever, and, Supergirl, suddenly these characters were going away, or they were given different origin stories so that Superman could retain that status of being the last Kryptonian.
Right.
But they love Zod. So they kept trying to bring him back, but they bring him back from a parallel universe. So it wasn't the real Zod. It was a parallel universe Zod. There's multiple of these Zods who've been in the comics and then they disappear. So there's another. It's not that straightforward. So that was the first thing. The second one, you're not going to believe this, but Richard Donner actually partly wrote a comic, Superman: The Last Son.
Oh, so
maybe, again, just joining two things up. Maybe that's one of your starting places.
Right, yeah, good point. That might be a good one to actually think. In fact, I think that should be my homework, that, Dave.
Yeah,
definitely. But no, it's good. That. Thank you for that. It's good.
No worries. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about the movie?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I know. We said in the last one that we were and ahhing on what we were going to review for the second one. And I think because these films were shot simultaneously and sort of simultaneously back to back in some respects, we felt it was only right because there was a lot of unanswered sort of questions last time. For me personally, and probably for people listening, going off what a couple of people had said who got to me on social media, and even some of my social circle friends and family had said the same thing, like, asking questions about this thing with Richard Donner and why he sort of got fired from the project and things like that. And what basically the second one comes to is, as I alluded to in the first, they'd shot 75% of the second, and then because they thought the first one was going to be a turkey, they then stopped production, took all the best bits out of the second one that they thought, put it in the first, as we know, the time travel thing and everything, reversing the Earth and things like that. And then when it became such a massive critical hit, they were like, oh dear, we're going to have to go back to this now and sort of redo shooting, but because there was problems between Richard Donner and the Salkinds, they brought in Richard Lester, who was like a renowned director. He was like a mediator in the first film, and he then got the job of taking over the second film and reshooting and finishing off what Richard Donner had started. But because he needed at least 51% directing of the film, he then decided just to reshoot the scenes, and some scenes that Richard Donner had done, and he just reshot them or he did something to them. But in the second one, it caused a lot of problems because Gene Hackman would not come back for the second film. Even though he's in it, the scenes that he's in were actually shot for the first. And when they were filming the second side by side, so what they had to do was use a body double and a voice double, which we'll get into at some point. You noticed it after after we were talking privately.
Yeah.
Now, it didn't actually come out until June 1981, but it's got a stamp mark. I know it doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people. It's got a stamp mark in 1980. But obviously the film was pretty much finished before 1980, but due to sort of the editing and that, it took a long time to come out in the cinema in America. And obviously from there, the first one made Christopher Reeve a star anyway, but the second one just made him typecast really for the rest of his acting career, even though he was a Broadway actor. He was a theatre. He was classically trained. He'd been all around the world. He was renowned as a great actor, theatrical actor, but he was just always going to be pigeonholed as Superman. And this one, and he even said it in his own words, he thinks the second one was the best of the series and his personal favourite in interviews. And I've watched quite a few documentaries today on it as well. So I think the idea of the second one shouldn't have been, in my eyes, as successful as it was, but it just seemed to work. And with Richard Donner getting a sacked sort of thing and left behind, when Richard Lester come in, I think in that respect, that's why you got the film you got, because of the action and the sequences. There's a lot of things we'll get to in the film that probably won't make sense or will make sense, and he changed in that, because even down to the musical score, John Williams' score, obviously the iconic music, but he would not return for the second film. So the guy called Ken Thorne, he had to then take John Williams' score and change it, so he slightly sped up the music for the start. But it also became apparent that John Williams wasn't in the film, because what they were saying is they had to regurgitate a lot of the music in different scenes. And that's why you're sort of hearing the same stuff all the time, because he had only so much to work with, this guy. And I never knew that. Obviously, we said in the first one, he did both of them, and he's credited for doing them, and it's his score, because it's the orchestra, London Harmonic Orchestra and that. But this Ken Thorne had to come in and adjust it accordingly for the film, because of the sort of direction of how they made the second film, because it wasn't as serious as the first, which is apparent because of the change of director.
So it's like a cover band of John Williams then.
Yeah, I couldn't really tell the difference between the two films. I sort of put them on and listened to the score. I couldn't really say one way or the other that there was much of a difference, but apparently there was. So it's an interesting fact. It's just a little Easter egg that I came across when I was researching.
I mean, that must be a trained ear to pick that out, because I'll be honest, I wouldn't know the difference.
No,
it just sounds the same to me. I said last week about that goosebump reaction every time I hear that music, and even just going back and re-listening to our podcast, it happens in the car. Then you just completely involuntary every time I hear that music. And it was the same when we watched the second one. As soon as that music starts going, it's here we go, it's Superman. Yeah, and I agree. And I think I've got it as a ringtone on my phone. I've had it on my ringtone now for a good 4 or 5 months, and every time it goes, it always puts a smile on my face. I know it shouldn't, but it's just it's just so ironic that is actually my ringtone, and it's just by coincidence we're reviewing the two films to start with. So yeah, I'm ready to get into it if you want, Dave. I think one thing I would like to say, obviously at the end we're going to go through it as we did last week, and we're going to sort of try and go sort of scene to scene, bring in little things that we've noticed, as we said last time.
But before we give our review score, I'm just gonna give a little rundown of the Richard Donner cut, because I've actually watched that this week and how that was born. I mean, there's a lot of things I want to say when we're doing this, because now I've watched the other one, it makes sense, but I'd rather say it at the end. So we give our review of the actual theatrical film and what was out in the cinemas and around the world, and as we know it, as you know, for 40 odd years. And then there's a couple of things that I want to bring in for maybe 5-10 minutes at the end before we sort of give our scores. I think it sort of gives it a bit of dance for you as well, so you can actually go back and watch it at some point, Dave, as well.
Yeah, so Chris and I had discussed, and what we thought is, again, just playing on that kind of different perspectives angle. So I've intentionally not watched the Donner cut, and so I'll be hearing the differences at the end of the show as well, and I'll no doubt have some questions on it.
Cool. I hope I've got the answers, Dave.
Well, let's see. We can edit those out if if you've got no answers.
Thank you.
All right then. Well, let's get into our Superman 2 for episode 2. Okay, so we start off, and actually last week I was telling you I was a little bit confused over the start of Superman 1, and I was thinking I've put the wrong movie in. This is Superman 2. And I think the beginning of the movie, the little bit of a penny dropped. Actually, they start in a very similar way. Similar but different. You know, we start off with a quite bright scene, and I'll be honest, I don't want to start off on a negative, but it was a little bit Buck Rogers. You know, this is a few years after Star Wars, isn't it? But it wasn't up to the Star Wars effects, and we get this very 60s futuristic looking stormtrooper, and actually straight off the bat, I'm laughing and almost crying because Non, he wanders in as if he's looking for the toilet. You know, there's no stealth. You've got this, you know, again, 60s stormtrooper there, and Non just like wandering in. Then so he gets in there, he snaps his neck, and this futuristic, you know, actually a question for you. Do you think that's a guy in there, you know, like the stormtroopers, or do you think it is a robot?
Dave, I swear to you, that is the first thing on my list. I put, this has got on his stream, I put Soldier. This is my like sort of quick comment when I watched it earlier in the week. I put Soldier, very Star Wars stroke Battlestar Galactica. And you just said, because he actually looks like one of the soldiers in the new Star Wars. You know, when Rey and Kylo Ren fight against the House of Ren, you know, the actual, when he kills, spoilers, when he did the scene, and if you haven't watched it, but yeah, and he looked like that. And then I'm thinking, I remember watching like the old Star Wars, I remember having a figure like that, and I'm thinking, what is going on? Might as well put him in red. It's like, well, I'm on the wrong film set here. I know it was filmed at Pinewood, but it's like he'd walked onto Superman set.
Oh, you're right. I was just thinking Pinewood. So one of the things the clever sort of producers do, they reuse a lot of sets and things and a lot of costumes, and it could have been in the background for Star Wars or something, couldn't he? But I thought, again, you know, we're supposed to be talking about this superior race, these Kryptonians, and whether it's a guy in a suit or whether it's a robot, you know, it's supposed to be very, very advanced. But on his bat belt, on his bat utility belt, he's got a little button that just goes alert, alert. You know? And that snaps his neck. Well, I've got to assume he's a bloke. If he snaps his neck, it'd be be a big design flaw, wouldn't it, in your robots if you could get them to be quiet.
One thing I've got with that whole scene is, obviously we don't see it in the first one. We just see that Zod and that are sort of on trial, and they've got this council there. There's all these famous actors who are obviously the council. And then you get this bit, like you say, he snaps his neck. And then it's quite obvious from what we said in the first episode that that scene should be a continuation from the first scene. Or it's sort of like just before this happens, before they get sent to the Phantom Zone. But the problem is, because Brando wasn't in this film, as we said, because he had the dispute with money, that scene was the same scene as the first one, but without him in it. And it just... I mean, they're even stood in the wrong positions. You know, if you watch the first one, when they get sent to the Phantom Zone, they're not even stood in the same position. And it's like, did somebody not watch the first one and go, hang on a minute? You know, whatever was going on with him, they should have done something that it just didn't hold well. And like you say, it was as if that first scene in the first film never happened. Because if that, as I said last week, if that wasn't in it, you wouldn't even question this. It'd just be, they've been arrested, tried, guilty and all that, and then they're off. And I like you. It was like they walked on set, they put a bit of smoke effect on along the studio floor, and obviously, Fingy's so powerful in that scene. To be fair, General Zod, he's quite clever. What he says, it sets the whole tone for his character, I think. It's the only positive I got out of that scene, if I'm being honest.
Well, the other kind of question I had was what a red crystal was. I mean, it wasn't particularly well guarded. There wasn't this huge military coup. Like I say, none kind of wandered in as if he's lost, killed off one guard and snapped a red crystal. And it seems a bit harsh, to send them off to the Phantom Zone for that. But so maybe, it's like the crown jewels or something, the red crystal.
But Dave,
it seemed a bit harsh to me.
but you're talking about a film universe where 12 to 15 army guys on Earth just decide to descend on some woman, and then a nuclear warhead gets changed on a bridge without anybody even thinking. So, I think the artistic license, and again, as we said at the start, a 40-year-old film, you're thinking, there's no way that you'd watch the film now, there'd be all sorts of different things going into logistically how that was possible, what they did. Do you understand what I mean? But it just seems to be like, like you said, it's the whole of Krypton could go up in smoke, and just some random guy who's strolled off the wrong film set is guarding it. It doesn't make any logical sense. But again, it's the stuff that you never questioned as a kid. You just like, these are super baddies, they can obviously just turn up and take people down at will. I do have it's so ironic and funny that you put the same things as me. It's literally the same, very clever.
So I guess you mentioned about Brando, and we talked about Brando last week. So again, watching this umpteen times as a kid, it didn't matter to me at all that he wasn't there. But this time I was just very, very aware that he wasn't there, because we were talking last week about, he was suing the producers. So, that was something I noticed. And again, I wondered if it was one of those things stuck in there at the end, just to shoot Brando out of the movie effectively.
Yeah, it might have been a bit of a inadvertent sort of, that's like a degeneration game. This is what you could have won, because he just didn't. I don't even think he got credited, because he was billed as the main actor in the first one, and in the second one, obviously he's never to be seen. It's all centres around his mother, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think they were probably worried that if they showed him for a scene, it cost them $1 million a scene or something. It was probably one of those, wasn't it? So even though they had all the footage, you don't want to take any chances when it gets down to there, do you?
No, and I agree with that. I agree. It's something now, as we look at it from a reviewer's point of view, and what we're going for on the podcast. It's something really where you're thinking it was a necessary scene, but I don't think it was executed very well. If that makes sense. Yeah,
I agree. So then we get into the montage, don't we, at the beginning? And I guess what this made me think of was This is probably in the days before, you had a lot of home videos.
Yeah.
So, and certainly the internet. So, now you wouldn't have that same montage. Basically, just throughout the opening credits, you get a replay, a super concise replay of the first movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it made sense what you said last week about, when I said the little space pod rises up and it's very clearly on a rope, and you said I can see it at the beginning of the second one. I get what you mean now. It's all part of that montage.
Yeah, it is, and to be fair, my comment I'd put was I do like that montage. I think it goes on the right amount of time. It brings in the audience for people who probably didn't watch the film originally, or anybody who could pick it up now and watch it, and they won't have to watch the first one really in some respects. And I just thought it was right. It gave it that sort of trailer feel to it, but not enough when it turns you off, if that makes sense. But I think it just tied everything in together, because you're like, yeah, great. Right, now we can watch the second one. I did like it. I do like that start bit, I must admit.
Yeah. When you're reviewing it and you've just watched it last week, you probably don't need it quite so much. But there's not many people who do that, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah. No.
So the very first scene of the movie, and I really like this actually. So Clark's going into the Daily Planet, and he's kind of wandering in there, and you can see more so than the first movie, which was very, very awkward. Here he's kind of got a spring in his step, and he's very confident, but he's still a nerd confident, isn't he?
Yeah.
No one's paying attention. He's trying to spark up conversations. People who are just wandering past, and I love the bit. He just flicks his hat to the hat stand behind him, and just no one's looking. He doesn't even acknowledge it. I've no idea how they pull that off, but it looked awesome.
Yeah, it does. It did look awesome. That's one thing I noticed straight away, was that whole scene. That was as if to say, yeah, I'm dopey, but you do know who I am, sort of thing. I really enjoyed that little sort of skit. It was like the slapstick side we were saying last week. It just it added a bit of, I'm actually playing at being sort of clumsy and unassuming, but really, who am I, sort of thing. I really like it. I thought they're just nice little touch, and it brings out Christopher Reeve, I think, as a character. His acting. I thought he's acting in this second one. I thought he's acting, especially with this sort of comedy stuff. He's just really, really. He's such a talented guy. And I think what you said last week hit home with me a lot, and it's made me sort of research a lot about him this week that I've never done. I knew some of his origins of his acting and where he come from, but to actually sort of see the range of his acting skills, and this is apparent in this. It might not be to a lot of people, but in them days, like now, you watch a film like an X-Men or the Avengers or whatever. I'm not saying they don't have to act, but it's heavily reliant on the CGI. Yeah, these sort of films weren't. These were reliant on you believing that character was Superman or the Hulk or Spider-Man or whoever, and their acting sort of shines through if they're successful. And I think Christopher Reeve in these little skits, it really sort of comes through that he is actually Clark Kent.
Yeah. We'll stay on target, so I don't want to say too much about the third movie, and it'll probably be a little bit of time before we get to the third. But I remember in the third movie, there is a scene where he's dressed as, he is Clark, and dressed as Clark. And before your eyes, he transforms into Superman. I don't mean with some kind of effects or anything, just his body's position, the way he carries himself. You probably haven't seen it for a few years, so I'll elaborate on it when we get to it. But he literally, somehow, before your eyes, by no effects whatsoever, he transforms without saying anything, and it's just the best thing I think I've seen any actor do.
Well, I've got something in this film that we're going to review that I picked up on, and straight away I thought, yeah, that's him. But one thing I would like to say, Dave, the same scenes that we're talking about was when he's in the Daily Planet. is the fact that, and I sent you a message over this, he's a little Easter egg, and I don't know why it's there, but in Penny White's office, and I've got it here actually, it's frozen because I've got the film running in the background as we review it, is a picture of Bill Cosby on the wall. Now, I don't know why he's there in an album, but Penny White has got Bill Cosby on the wall, and it's the most random Easter egg I think I've ever come across in a film.
Yeah, and that hasn't aged well.
I know, yeah. I wasn't going to say much on that, but
let's scooch on past that one.
Let's get past that. But just a random Easter egg. I don't know why that is in the film. I just don't what reference it has. But anyway, carry on, mate.
Yeah. So anyway, when Clark's obviously a bit preoccupied, but there's all this hive of activity. There's obviously something going on, and he's obviously out of the story, and Perry White's asking him, where have you been? He says he's been at home just reading Dickens because he hasn't got a TV, which I don't know why, it just tickled me. So anyway, we get this dialogue. So we find out there's terrorists in Paris. They've got this hydrogen bomb, and we've got our best reporter, Lois Lane. She'll be over there. She'll do a great job, and hopefully they don't blow up the place. Yeah. So, very early we get a bit of peril, so we had a long stretched out wait for Superman, didn't we, in the first movie? Whereas now, and I looked at the clock, it's like 10 minutes in, and that's all the credits and everything. But 10 minutes in, we get Superman. So he sort of running through the back alley there, and he just, again, I kind of like the effect of it.
Yeah.
Where he's running along and then he's suddenly in his Superman suit and it's phased in. But I'm like, but he didn't, what powers has he used to do that? It looks cool. But it's not because he's super quick or anything. Well, and again, just the rational part of my brain and over analytical part is just questioning that a bit. But anyway, so he heads off.
Yeah.
And we know from the last movie, when he was going around the Earth several times a second, that he's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Whereas this time he seems to meander a bit. So he sets off to Paris.
Yeah, sorry, Dave. Sorry, say that again. I bloody coughed then. Sorry.
That's all right. So we see him as he's meandering off to Paris. So then we switch, and I guess the timelines could be, it might not be one after the other. It could be staggered a little bit. So this could be happening before, while kind of Clark and Perry are having that conversation. So we get to see Lois is actually in Paris. Yeah. Trying out some pretty terrible French. So she's saying to the taxi driver, "Mercy, mercy." Which I think she's overly playing the fact that she's pretty terrible at French, to be honest. But so we find that it seems like the police don't have any. They can't play poker, I can't imagine. So they're just talking out in the open. So she finds out there's a hydrogen bomb. They're just discussing it, and the French like, I don't even know what it is. They might have one, they might not do. And so Lois just happens to be right there. She's just got out of the cab, and she's like, "What, hydrogen bomb? That could blow up the whole of Paris." Well, maybe, It's, and the thing that I noticed is, I guess, there are certain scenes that they had to shoot at the Eiffel Tower, no doubt. So when they're doing that, they're in France. When they're not there, they are clearly at Pinewood Studios. Because the amount of hello accents, bad French accents, was unbelievable and something I'd never noticed before.
I think I actually put it in the realms of the actual Derek Trotter realm of French, because all we needed was a couple of bonnet de douches, and then we were on an episode of Only Fools and Horses, because it's just, I understand, they're not really going to put, for something so Americanized, they're not really going to have subtitles, but even I can get my head around that policeman with the little tash and the grey hair, who's obviously the detective, and he's doing a little bit of a press conference outside. I get that. I can live with that because they may be American or English or whatever, and he has to sort of speak in broken French. But there's not really any reason for the terrorists to be, speaking the way they're speaking. And you just, I agree with you. Logically, you're thinking, I don't understand why they would be speaking in English other than for the film, which obviously that's why they've done it. Because when obviously they're doing the scene and it goes, and the little short one of the lot, just like, it drops and everything. And it's like, I don't know. It didn't sit very well. I think it would have been more authentic if at least terrorists had spoken French, I think, personally.
It did. It was a bit jarring, wasn't it, when they were speaking to each other in English. But before they were speaking to each other, I think it was before, one of the terrorists turns to a nun and says, "Don't try any tricks." I'm just utterly puzzled by that. They've got a whole group of them, but he singles out a nun. All right, okay.
I didn't even notice that.
Did you not notice? Rewind it. Have a look. No. It's like, say to the nun, "Don't try any tricks, you." I see ya.
Throw some holy water on him. It's not the omen. He's not going to disintegrate.
It's just utterly bizarre. But so yeah, and Lois, you've got this terrorists can apparently blow up the whole of Paris, and we've got one policeman guarding the access to it. So Lois just gives him a quick, bit of diversion, and then she's off. So she's in there and manages to climb under the elevator before the terrorists actually start going to the top. And she's in a bright pink suit as well. So, not only I don't quite understand that why don't the terrorists see her, but why doesn't everyone from the ground see her? She's in a bright pink suit. It was a bit odd, but then I wasn't actually sure. What was your plan? She climbed under the elevator.
Yeah, I always wondered
what was the next part of the plan.
Yeah, I always wondered that, and I always wonder why she was reciting the Pulitzer Prize thing. I know, obviously, maybe to distract from the fact that she's going so high in the air, but one other thing I picked up on though, Dave, and I don't know about you, is these two French policemen just literally before the lift descends. And they must have the best pair of binoculars I have ever seen. They must be at least half a mile away from the Eiffel Tower.
Good, weren't they?
Zoom in right on the top floor where the terrorists are. And I'm thinking they must be some, different levels, Kryptonian sunglasses, binoculars or something, because it just didn't make. Again, looking at it, thinking that just does not look right at all, But then years ago, you took all that in. Is it? It's that's right. That they've got binoculars, but looking at the draw distance, you think that's not even anywhere close to what you'd see. You'd be lucky to even see any of the Eiffel Tower from there.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think we didn't talk about this, but I noticed in the first movie as well, they drop these little hints that Lois is really bad at spelling.
Yeah,
and I don't know why they do that, but they do. So probably she's if it's in line with that character, she's got to concentrate really hard to spell properly, maybe. And you do. I'm not great with heights myself either. So when you get that view and the elevator's going up and you're looking straight down, I'd be looking for something to take my mind off it. And so if I had to concentrate really hard on spelling, I think that's probably what I'd do as well.
Yeah. Fair point.
So we get the English actors speaking in French accents, discussing. We get a bit of dialogue, and we find out that there's a timer of 60 seconds to set this thing off. So it's not very long at all. But you get those police that you just mentioned with the old binoculars there. They're like, yeah, we've been watching them all the time. Let's cut the cables to the elevator, and we'll drop it right through. And then someone says, I think, something like, maybe they've armed the device. Nah, I've been watching them all the time. It'll be fine. I mean, that is a high roller, isn't it? It's just, it'll be fine. So anyway, they snap the cables, and sure enough, you get one of the English actors. So good old Richard Griffiths, I think his name is, Harry Potter's stepdad, essentially. So he drops the device, and he looks up, and bearing in mind, we're talking about a bomb that can blow up Paris. So if you're right underneath, it's curtains. So you would imagine you'd be a bit upset. But he gets it, and it just, I had to rewind it about 3 times. The way he sort of looks up and he goes, "It started." and again, in real life, it'd be something more like, what's this going on? Yeah. And then the other guys would be like, "You idiot, what are you doing?" In bad French accents. But no, we get, "It started." And the guy takes his cigarette out and he goes, "Oh my God."
That sounded like Peter Sellers then, of King Bam. I was waiting for him to, he said hello, that guy go, "Good morning." They all go, hello.
You rewind it. Right, I'm on here for my comics knowledge, not my impressions. But you go back and look at it, and just that, understatement is just phenomenal.
That's a classic, Dave. It started. It's almost as good as...
Oh, my God.
It's almost levels of thinking. Even, I'm going off there, but Taken, good luck. It's just like, oh, my God. That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
So obviously, I'm laughing away. Lois is plummeting to the floor with the bomb. And, meanwhile, Superman's been taking his sweet time to get across the Atlantic and across to Paris. But he saves the day. And again, I had a little bit of a problem with the physics of it, because she's hurtling towards the ground. Now he stops the lift, but surely her momentum is just going to, she's going to fly right through the floor, isn't she?
She'd be dead, I think, yeah.
But anyway, getting beyond that, so he saves that. And, remember we found out just a minute ago, we've got like 60 seconds for this thing to go off. So we have a little bit of flirting, a little bit of back and forth between Superman. But then, we get that kind of cool effect, don't we? He says, "Oh, just leave this with me," or whatever it is he says. And, sort of takes the elevator up through the top. It's clearly an elevator with a Superman doll attached, but it kind of looks like he's pushing the elevator up through the roof of the Eiffel Tower. And again, our 60 seconds are counting. No sooner has he done that than he's beyond the moon. So I got there in like a second or something, and then throws it off. And that's when we get the explosion, and we can see from those sonic waves that it's a big one and knocks Superman back. And the guys who got jettisoned into the Phantom Zone in the first movie just happened to be hanging around by the moon, it seems.
Yeah, it's just they were on holiday, I think.
Yeah. I mean, again, space is a big place, but not really when the plot needs it to be. So yeah, then we get, that's the moment, isn't it? That's when it gets real. We get that glass shattering, and the 3 kind of criminals or prisoners are released. And so then, Chris, do you want to take us from here for a bit?
Yeah, well, obviously the next scene is they escape, and there's some sort of dodgy CGI as they're supposedly floating till they get the bearings, and then they sort of bear down onto the moon. And then the next scene pans in Metropolis. Clark's walking on the street, signals Lois. She gives him away. She's like, stomping away to get into work. and he decides to walk right in front of a car. Now, obviously, there's certain things within the film that are getting to, like, she doesn't really notice it, but, like, he is Superman. I mean, how nobody anywhere else just stopped the fact that this taxi ploughed into a bloke and came off worse is beyond me. You know, like, this guy's just decimated the car, the radiator and everything, and he just sort of looks at it, brushes it off, and
scratches his head a bit, doesn't he?
Yeah, I don't.
Superman was here to save my car.
I mean, you'd think he'd go and pick him a new one up from somewhere, or he'd do something to help. He just sort of looks at him and goes, "Oh well, mate, you'll have to get your pay for your insurance to pay for that one." But because what's thing is, I think that scene, as obviously we know what the rest of the film is, but I don't know whether these sort of little scenes that happen are all where he says later on, doesn't he? I think I wanted to do it, or I wanted to tell her, and I don't know whether these are all like a subconscious thing, supposedly, where even though it's a bit of slapstick, it's supposed to have another meaning, as in he's trying to give her subtle hints that he's actually Superman to reveal his identity. Looking at it now, that's the one thing I took out of that scene. As much as it's a bit of comedy and a bit of a joke, you know, and the poor taxi driver's probably not going to work again for a few weeks.
Exactly, yeah. He's lost his livelihood.
Yeah, just lost, you know, Superman's supposed to be a man of the people and all this, and he's just looked at him and gone, yeah, he'll be all right, and just walks off. And it's like, it's a great scene, but only now as you look at it as an adult, you're thinking, what an absolute terrible thing to do, you know. But it's, you know, it's seen as it is. I just took from it, as I've just said, it was a subtle little thing building towards the sort of reveal of who his character is, which I thought was quite good. And then, obviously, we go into the Daily Planet, and, you know, Lois and Clark are together, and, you know, he puts his hat down, and she's like blustering off and chatting away. And then we get the famous little scene where we get the orange juice. You know, he comes in, and it was one of them scenes where I always remember it as a kid, because she's got a fag in her mouth talking about, you know, sort of being healthy and things like that, and then pouring a bit of orange juice, and, you know, he crushes his finger and he sort of plays it. Oh, I remember as a kid thinking, did she notice then, because he crushes his finger and doesn't really react? But he does sort of react as if he's got a bad finger watching the scene again. And it just, I know it's a daft thing, but it was them sort of little scenes that always stuck with me, because it's all building towards who he is. And that's what I was saying about the scene before, is it sort of little things to put in the subconscious that he's trying to tell her who he is.
Yeah. I couldn't work out if the sort of filmmakers were trying to give us... there's a lot of hypocrisy there, isn't there? So, you know, she's got all these orange juices. She's going on about being healthy, and you can see she's got an ashtray absolutely full of cigarettes, and she's got one hanging out of her mouth. So, you know, she's almost finishing one off and lighting another one, and it zoomed in on the full ashtray. Yeah. So so it's clear they were trying to tell us that there's a hypocrisy here. Yeah, but I wasn't sure if it was trying to tell us that about Lois, or if it was more a wider barb at society kind of thing. Yeah, I genuinely don't know the answer to that, but clearly they were trying to make a point of that. That, you know, it's a bit silly to try and make yourself healthy when you know with the right hand, while the left hand's you're busy killing yourself with it.
Yeah, and then when you look at the sort of even on the wall and that, I mean, on the back of a door, she's got a pair of roller skates, and there's a bike there. I don't know whether it's an exercise bike or it's a pedal bike, but these are these little things in her office again, like you were just saying, little subtle hints of, you know, you think people. I suppose it's like anything. People think they're healthy, but it's not. I don't know. I agree with you. It's a very bizarre little segment, I think. You know, it is obviously a bit of a joke scene again, another sort of Clark and Lois light-hearted scene, but it's just, I suppose it's the relationship that they get on really well, and he's sort of following around like a lapdog, but he
is that, you do get that lovesick puppy feeling from him in that scene, don't you?
Yeah, you do. The good little scenes, because it means so much later on in the film. But when you're watching him now, you're sort of like, I don't know. No, it doesn't sit well with me. I don't know. It evolves the character to who he is and the Clark Kent persona, but then he sort of drops Clark Kent pretty quick later in the film, for obvious reasons. But I don't know. They're just little things they put in, and I think that's more the director's direction of who he is. And you get like a 20-minute little segment, don't you? Like, or even the Paris thing, as I touched on last week, is that them sort of scenes. Even though, like you were saying, joking, he's doing a bit of flirting with her and stuff like that, but he's got to save the world, and he gets, he's into the space, and these are the little things that they put in, and I think it's trying to be a bit like the comic book side of things, but some of the comics are a lot more serious than the films, and I don't know whether that's how Richard Lester perceived it, because I think Richard Donner had more of a grasp on the comic book, sort of the way the stories are told, and your imagination's got to run wild with you. And these sort of things I can't work out, because Richard Lester was renowned as like a bit of a comedy director, you see, from a lot of his work. He always had to have a bit of humour in what he did. He'd done like the Three Musketeers and stuff the year before.
He'd done some of the Beatles movies, hadn't he? So he was an American fellow living over in the UK for years. I think he was in London, and very, very tongue-in-cheek stuff. I'm sure I've read or heard a quote that he never read any Superman or anything. So who knows? But he didn't seem to have a massive. I think for some of the things we see later in the movie, I'm not sure he had a massive, great grasp on the character.
No, and I think one of the things he did do was he shot the film how he thought comic books should be shot. So when Richard Donner did the first one, it was very epic and as a big film, but he tried to sort of cram as much people as he could on screen when he was filming a lot of the scenes. And that's where he thought that, like obviously in a comic book, you've got little rectangular windows, haven't you, where it tells a story and a bit of dialogue, and that's what he's trying to do on certain parts of the film. And that, I mean, I don't know whether it comes across like that, but I sort of reading it, I get what he was trying to do, because he wasn't a comic book fan.
Yeah,
I think he laid stuff out too much, but then there were certain things where you literally had to sit there for 5 minutes, and like you were saying last week, and just obviously it was the Richard Donner was the first one, but you sort of, like you said, it's very stuck with what you said about it just is. And it's like you just got to accept it for what it is. This second one, he seems to lay out loads of clues and loads of different things that I don't think sometimes were that necessary.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously from there, the next scene is we go to the prison, and Lex Luthor's there with Otis, with his probably Gene Hackman. As much as I think he's a great actor, and he will always be Lex Luthor, probably had one of the worst skull caps we've ever seen.
It's pretty bad, isn't it?
It's probably. It's terrible. You can see his hair. You can see everything about. The only thing that makes that scene is Otis. Like you said that last week, the fat guy music, that he has his own little theme tune, Otis, doesn't he? And
That's it, yeah.
He literally blows his cover, doesn't he? Blows by saying like, the little black box in the cell, And I remember as a kid, I had to keep rewinding that because I could not understand what Otis was saying. So what now obviously he was saying the little black box in our cell, but it builds it up nicely, and it's took like 20 odd minutes to see Lex Luthor in the film, which is good. But I think Gene Hackman is, as much as Christopher Reeve makes the film and everything about him, they're just his first two films. Gene Hackman's so good at what he does. He's just there all the time with little things going on, and he can see his brains ticking over, and he wants to do something else to get a Superman. And they're only in it for little bits. But like I said, it limited in this film because they could only use what they'd already filmed, and so had to sort of segment in and work around the fact that he wasn't there.
So because we get a little recap, don't we? And one of the things I found a little bit strange. So Otis sort of recaps what they were trying to do, the scam, the real estate scam in the first movie. And he said, so it was almost like a Scooby-Doo sort of line. We'd have almost got away with it, if it wasn't for Superman. And he says about, millions of people would have been killed. And I thought that was a bit strange, because I think that was just a byproduct of his real estate scam.
Yeah.
I don't think he was his primary objective was not to kill millions of people. So I just thought it was a bit weird to put that line in.
Yeah, it didn't seem to. Yeah, it's true that it doesn't go with the plot of what he was doing. He understood, obviously, we know the situation with Miss Tessmacher and stuff in the first one. That's one of the reasons that, she saved Superman because of her mother. But he sort of was saying deal with it. But there was a couple of scenes in the first one where you could see it sat even uneasy with Lex Luthor. So to say that, yeah, it's a very good point, that, Dave. To say that was like the main thing was to kill people. Then the second bit was to get all this land and make a load of money. So, yeah, that's very. I've not looked at that before.
The other thing that stood out, and again, I don't know why. I think, well, I know why it stood out for me is because I don't understand it. Lex turns to one of the, inmate number 6 or whatever and says, I want my Liberace record back. And the other guy turns to him and says, there's a scratch on it. And I was like, what is the point of that? What are you telling me, filmmakers? What am I supposed to take from that? Am I supposed to take that Lex is quite a cultured guy, so he listens to Liberace? Or I just genuinely didn't know what I was supposed to take from that.
Yeah, I've never been able to get my head around what that signifies. I don't know whether it's code for. I don't know. I mean, the guy's character was never expanded upon. It was a nothing sentence, really. I've always thought that myself, irrespective of us reviewing it, thinking, I don't know what he was getting at.
To tell us,
yeah. I don't know whether he was supposed to be that guy. The code for Liberace's thing was, we need you to help us with this because we're going to escape. I don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you, Dave, because it's always one of them things where you're thinking, there's just no reason for that guy to even be in the scene, really.
Yeah.
Maybe
one of the listeners will come back and tell us, if we had something like an internet to search, we'd find in 2 seconds that actually, it is code for, the break is on for tonight or something like that. But no, it does seem a bit weird.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, we get that back and forth about the little black box, and we find out that this little black box tracks alpha waves.
Yeah,
I'm still wondering, and so what? Tracks alpha waves, brilliant. How does that help you? But it clearly does.
Yeah,
but I don't understand how it does. Do you?
No, because it's not like it's we go to. Obviously, the next scene is, the moon or whatever. So you'd think that by him saying alpha wave, someone at NASA who is obviously cleverer than, or as clever, say, as Lex Luthor, because he's supposed to be this criminal mastermind, will then say, we've picked up 3 alpha waves on, the moon, because the next scene leads into, obviously, ordering that on the moon. And they decimate the spaceship and the astronauts and stuff. So that would have made more logical sense for them guys. He was obviously Cliff from Cheers again, which was a great spot by you last week, Dave, because I knew he was in the second. Exactly, I didn't know he was in the first one. I knew he was in the second one. I'm a massive fan of Cheers, but it didn't make any sense. And them guys, if they'd said it, you'd gone, well, that's obviously what an alpha wave is. It's a sort of unusual activity that they're not used to. So I don't know.
The Kryptonians give off more alpha waves or something like that.
Yeah, something. We've not seen 3 alpha waves. If they said it there, like you say, it's in Superman. A bit like what says it later on when someone says we've not seen things like it's in Superman. The reporter says it, so you think that that would make more logical sense. So again, it's another little subplot whole I found that didn't really explain much, and it didn't really make much sense. Even with your imagination, you're not really sat there thinking, oh yeah, they've done that because of this, and you're supposed to think that happened. It just didn't make any sense, really.
Yeah. So yeah, we see Cliff, or do we see Cliff at first? I don't think we see him till later, do we? At first, we get a bit of interaction with the other guy, just talking to the astronaut. We kind of get that sense that, this is the late 70s, early 80s. So we've had the moon landings. Everyone was very excited at the time. But now it's kind of old hat. So these guys have been up there for 45 days or something, and no one really cares.
Yeah.
So, primary thing is staving off the boredom there. But did you notice that, most astronauts, I mean, you have to be pretty smart to get yourself up there. And I just thought they played that first astronaut as a bit of a Billy Bob type character. He's sort of a bit scruffy, got the unshaven, got the baseball cap on.
Yeah,
a bit weird.
Yeah, no. I've put that in my notes. I'd actually seen that, thinking this guy he looks like he should be in the town, that Zod and that visit later on, because he's like, they go to the hillbilly town. It's like what I don't understand is, even though they're in space, he should still have his suit on and stuff, and he's just sat there like he's nothing, like he's just, gone out for a takeaway, or he's sat in his car or something. It doesn't make... it's one thing, it's so weird that you've picked up on that, because it's like when I was watching it, thinking now, looking at it from a sort of critical view, thinking, even then, early 80s, 70s, all the stuff they'd seen about the moon landings and things like that, and obviously you understand it was 10 years afterwards, supposedly, or 11 years afterwards, it's still... They would have pretty much copied what NASA were doing. It just seemed very nonchalant, the way he was, just sat there like it was nothing.
Yeah.
Really bizarre.
We'll get on to worse ones. So, but anyway, go on, give us that. Oh no, it's the curl and the girl thing.
So it's the curl and the yeah.
The launch to that, but before that, so he initially says, doesn't he? I see a girl, so he sees Ursa sort of flying back, which would unsettle you a little bit, I think.
Yeah. And I think...
sorry, go on.
No. And then obviously the curl girl scene is one of them baffling things when I was a kid. I know obviously they explain what it is, but they're just like, they were sat there on the night shift like it's nothing. We've got a spaceship on the moon, and there's about 3 people on the night shift, like they're working in Sainsbury's or something, just stacking shelves. It just... There's even the lights are dimmed down and stuff, like someone's going to be having a kip in a corner or something. It just really strange.
What we get, so I'll go past it quick and then we'll come back a little bit. But what we get is he says he sees a girl. Then we get some terror, some real menace. We see the criminals demonstrating they're not very nice people, and then we're back to NASA. I'm not sure what's happened there. Has he been for coffee? See a girl? All right, nice one. Oh, look at that. It's my break. Right, I'll be back in a minute. And then we get the whole girl curl thing. So it's just weird. And then he's like, oh, it's down. But he's saying the radio's down after the spacecraft's crushed. So, well, of course it's down then.
Yeah.
Seemed to lose it almost as soon as he must have lost the line as soon as he said he's seen a girl.
Yeah, but there's no alarm raised or anything, is there? It's
just nonchalant.
Yeah, the radio's gone off. We're all right. Don't worry about it. Back then, obviously, technology-wise, they wouldn't have had cameras and things all over the place. They probably would have had one feed or a radio feed even. And I don't know that whole skit, even to when they're on and it pans back obviously to the moon, and they've obviously destroyed the people and they're getting the spaceship and everything. The whole thing, even the spaceship, it just looks so cheap and tacky, and you can even see sort of set lighting at the back, which is supposed to signify Earth, and it's obviously it's the moon, so it's supposed to signify Earth, and it's like you can even see that there's the big thing about the Neil Armstrong thing not being, real, and it's a film set.
Theories,
yeah, and all that stuff. So he's watching that thinking, it's black. They've got a line there which is supposed to signify the end of the moon, and there's this the space and everything, and they're just stood around like it's nothing. And I don't know, the whole thing when he pulls that spaceship down, it just looks like it's built out of tinfoil or something. That ship, it just looks really, really poorly made.
Yeah. I mean, when but again, though, we're looking at this movie now. I remember as a kid thinking this was a menacing scene, wasn't it? Just everything about it, because they just wipe out those astronauts.
Yeah.
But one line that I'd forgotten, again, it's just one of those lines that does jar with you. I'm sure we'll get to X-Men at some point, but there's a particular line that just, it's like fingernails down a chalkboard, a blackboard or whatever. Ursa says, "What kind of creature are you?" to the astronaut. And I thought, you're intelligent beings, right? You can see he's got a suit on, and you can see his face. Later, when she encounters a snake, she doesn't try and have a conversation with it, does she? It just seemed to use the word creature. I thought was a bit weird. It's like, what do you think he is? I know you're different, but you still kind of look a bit similar. So, I just thought it was a terrible line. Not to mention the fact they're on the moon, and she's just talking, but, we'll get past that.
Yeah, they can hear her as well in his suit and everything. yeah, there's no oxygen.
Well, there's no air. There's no molecules to vibrate against each other to make sound. So it's like, okay, we'll get past that.
Yeah,
but, she takes his badge off. Again, I didn't quite get. So, I was kind of thinking, well, his suit, all the air would just fly out of his suit, wouldn't it? So his suit would suck right onto his body. But no, we get the opposite. We get his suit blowing up. I just didn't understand why. But, it obviously wasn't a good thing. But again, even as a kid, I was like, how does that work?
That Marshmallow Man, didn't he?
Yeah, the Stay Puft Candy Man. So, so she takes him out, and then we get Zod, don't we? He picks up a fella by the leg. Again, clearly a balloon or something. But I actually thought they did a nice job. Again, we were saying about the Kryptonians. If it's a much higher gravity, they will be more dense, so they'll be heavier. Yeah. So that'd explain, well, that's why they're walking around on the moon without any problem. But the astronauts, I thought that effect of them, bouncing along, and I thought they did an okay job of that.
Yeah, when he pulls him towards him, you mean, and the guy sort of double jumps, doesn't he? Just
yeah.
I understand what you mean there, because it does. That's obviously how we see people move on the moon. So I think I have no problem with that when he pulled him towards him, because that Russian astronaut obviously speaks to him. What I could never understand about that scene, though, Dave, and you were probably going to bring this up, is the guy speaks to him. I don't understand what Zod says to him. I've never been able to understand what he says, because there's no subtitles. It's like Zod, I don't know if he's copying him, or he just starts speaking Russian. I just don't understand that scene at all.
Oh, I didn't even notice, to be honest. Yeah. I did notice. So, this is 1980. This is height of Cold War time. And the astronauts, you had an American up there. I think there was someone who was French, and there was definitely a Russian.
Yeah.
And I thought that's actually pretty progressive.
Yeah.
to do that. So
the Cold War.
Yeah, it was. To have them all up there working together during the height of the Cold War.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
I mean, Star Trek did it years before that, didn't they? When they had a chap up on a Russian up on the Enterprise. But anyway, I digress. So the other little note I've got here is, they're kind of, Ursa's having a bit of dialogue, isn't she? She's saying, well, look at our powers. They, as soon as they came out of the Phantom Zone, they were flying around. So straight away, it was almost as if they used all the powers, and then they were like, oh, look at that, we've got powers. What's going on? And then in a bit of deduction that would absolutely shame Sherlock Holmes, Zod tells us, the closer we get to an atmosphere with one yellow sun, the more our molecular density gives us unlimited powers.
Yeah.
I thought, crikey, that's a good guess. Yeah. All they're getting is, oh, we've got all these powers. What's all that about? Oh, yeah. Well, obviously, we're right next to an atmosphere with one yellow sun. That's the thing. And last week I was telling you about the whole. He started off just being more dense, so he could jump really high and stop speeding bullets because he was super dense and whatever.
Yeah.
I think one of the writers at some point had obviously had him flying, and the way they explained that was how he actually gets all his powers from the yellow sun. That's where the powers come from.
Right.
So, and that's that bit of exposition by Zod. That's what he's telling us. He's telling us we're getting our powers from the sun. Yeah. And so, but, it's one hell of a guess. Just do that, because Kryptonians didn't know that, I don't think. I don't think they did.
No.
But,
there's something else I was going to bring up, actually. I'll do it. It's in one of the scenes in a bit, but again, it was very much along them lines. It's not Zod. It's something else that gets said, and I'm thinking, I don't know how you've come up with that. Where have you researched this? But anyway, we'll get to that in a bit. So obviously, the next scene is Lex Luthor in jail playing chess. The guys, the prison officers saying, lights out, 3315 or whatever the cell is, and he goes back to the cell, and obviously Otis and Lex are playing chess, and he's having a go at him because they're just sort of looking at him, and then we sort of get that they're on a loop, and then he enters the room, and Lex Luthor obviously has his contacts, but he's now invented a sort of projector because of his criminal mastermind where it projects two human beings playing chess. Now there's no explanation for this because obviously the black box is mentioned, which is for the alpha waves, but there's no actual mention of how he's got this thing into his cell, how it's been made, whether the Liberace record thing was some sort of reference to it is unexplained. It's just one of them random scenes where, as a kid, I think I associated the black box with that sort of projector. And it's only as I've got older thinking, well, actually, no, the black box is to do with, as we've said, the alpha wave. So it doesn't make sense, that scene, other than the fact that, it gets him out of jail. And I could never understand, even as a kid, what was going on in that scene, where that come from.
I think the way I'd read that is, Lex Luthor is one of the smartest, if not the smartest bloke on the planet. So if the plot needs him to build something,
yeah, he will.
He just builds it, and it works however the plot needs it to work. The thing I noticed was when he sort of stood in front of it, you got this weird little Flash Gordon type effect, sound effect.
Yeah,
notice that?
Yeah,
I don't know why. As soon as I heard it, I just thought, oh, that's Flash Gordon. That.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'd have to. Not sure I've got the will to actually go and watch Flash Gordon straight away, but I'd be interested because sometimes they do reuse these little sound clips and stuff. There's a famous one called the Wilhelm Scream, which you see in Star Wars and Indiana Jones and loads of things. So I'll have to go back at some point and see if that actually did come from Flash Gordon.
That. I mean, it may have been like a bit of a nod towards it if someone was a fan. Sometimes it's a little Easter egg they throw in, don't they, just to keep the fans peaked. I mean, I know obviously years ago the Easter eggs were a big thing. Now every sort of hero film going has to have some sort of Easter egg, doesn't it? So maybe it was the start of them. It could be, mate. Like I say, I'll have to have a look into that one, Dave.
Yeah.
So obviously from there you get them Lex Luthor and that are, they're trying to escape out of a prison, but we've still got time for Otis to sort of do the old 2-finger thing above his head and Lex to sort of jump back like a little girl and make that little noise, because 2 sort of fingers have gone above his head on his silhouette on the wall as the light pans to him. And then again, these are just little slapstick things. You just like... It sort of dilutes, as much as I like it, as I said, Gene Hackman and the Lex Luthor thing, it sort of dilutes the whole seriousness of who Lex Luthor is, because he's just built a projector. He's about to escape from prison, probably no one's ever escaped from, but yeah, he's scared by some bloke putting 2 little shadow fingers above your head, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean... I couldn't help but laugh at that.
Yeah, it's a great scene. Because we've all done it in pictures, haven't we? Found the pictures years ago when you used to get them developed. I've had many a clip on the head because I put, 2 fingers behind someone's head in a family picture. Obviously, now you can delete them instantly and do them again. But years ago, you'd be waiting for him to go to Max Spielman. So when he did it, it just reminded me of being a kid. It's a funny scene. It's not like it's so that was offending, like thinking, oh gosh, right. It just was one of them bizarre scenes. It's like they balanced the fact that one scene he's an absolute, scientific and he's got an absolute genius to get out of this prison by creating this projector and fooling everyone. But then the next scene, he's just like the comedy, he's like balances his character, if that makes sense. It really little. And then obviously we get the scene where the Miss Tessmacher's come from nowhere. She's not really mentioned in the whole 30 minutes before this, but Miss Tessmacher's now in a balloon, which has not been spotted by the guards, who are obviously having a bit of a chat. And then
I think they've all got really sore necks or something, because none of them can seemingly look upwards.
Yeah.
Either when she's arriving or when they're leaving.
Yeah, when they're going. And then obviously Lex gets up, and then Otis, now that he's there, he's pulling down the thing, the ladders, and he's pulling down the balloon, and then we get the whole thing with Mr. Tessmacher like Otis and all that, and he kicks him, and he's obviously they get away, and he's caught, and again he plays a good little character. The guy who plays Otis, it's a believable sort of. He's even like a lovable sort of baddie, if that makes sense, because it's just he's tagging along because he's in awe of Lex Luthor sort of thing.
For me, I think I said last week, the 3 of them reminded me of the Three Stooges.
Yeah.
And I think seeing the second film, even more so. So, Lex is the Mo character, the guy with the bowl haircut. Otis is Curly, the fat one with the bald head. And that leaves Miss Tessmacher as the other one, I guess. But just that interaction, the sort of slightly dim-witted, chubby bloke, I just the whole thing. And again, it doesn't get across to you a menace. Now, this is a film for kids, obviously, probably reading a bit too much into it. But definitely, for me, they're the Three Stooges.
Yeah. No, I respect that. I agree. It just, like I say, it's a balance that they put in the film. Every time he did some sort of evil or whatever, they had to put a bit of a joke scene in there with him, or a little one-liner or something, which sort of takes away that element of evilness to his character. But yeah, so obviously from there we go to Niagara Falls, and it pans Niagara Falls, and that whole next scene for me, Dave, I've had a problem with this since I was a kid, because they actually get the most sleaziest porter I have ever seen in my life.
You are not going to believe this, right? I'm looking at my notes here. I've got sleaziest bellhop going. So honestly, you've almost word for word got what I got there.
Yeah, it's just like that, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Yeah, and then he's hanging around for his little his tip and that, and he lobs the bags down, and it's just like, you've got a more cliched person to play that?
I'm not sure, but even when he's going on about carrying through the threshold, he's saying, "Yeah, do you want a hand?" It's too much, isn't it? And there's no way that is his voice as well.
Yeah.
It's just so overdubbed. You know, it's almost like watching an old kung fu movie or something. It's that bad. But yeah, Sleaze it just doesn't do it justice, I think.
No, and then you've got, I mean, the one thing that stands out in the whole of that room, they go in, obviously it's all pink, and we get the, he puts the courgette on her, and it's like, you've got the lighting going through, so it looks a bit romantic. You're thinking, are they going to kiss or whatever, and then he sort of gets friend zoned, doesn't he, in that? But it's that. He does, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, because he
starts getting a bit like flirty with her.
He does, doesn't he? I noticed that. He's still playing the lovesick puppy, isn't he? But when he's sort of leaning up against the bed, what about the sleeping arrangements? And then she just sort of shoots him down like
Mr. Smith, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
And then you've got, but what always stands out, and I've never seen it in a film before, or even in real life, and obviously in these days with animal rights and that, you're not going to see, but it's that pink polar bear. The whole head, teeth, like obviously skin and fur of a polar bear just dyed pink on the floor, and obviously it becomes prominent in the next couple of scenes, but it's just like he's just thinking, how would they have got away with something like that? How could you even think that was romantic, having a bear's head stare at you? Because it's
bizarre, isn't it? Yeah.
It's really bizarre.
And a massive fire in the middle of the room doesn't seem like a good idea, does it? But
a wood fire without any sort of fluid or anything going on. Yeah. Always good.
The thing that. And again, I remembered this from a kid. So he sits on the bed, doesn't he? And it starts sort of vibrating or gyrating or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he stands up and he said, "Oh, it's alive." But you can see he's not saying that.
Yeah.
Again, it's clearly another overdub. But it was just so blatant that, his lips weren't moving at all. But it was Christopher Reeve talking.
Yeah. Yeah,
I just found that really strange, and again, this is not something new I'd picked up. I remember seeing that years and years ago and thinking it was a bit odd that someone had let that in the movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that whole little segment with him, it just, I don't know. He goes, like you say, what would he have done if Lois had said, "Well, go on then, let's try the bed out"? He gives his secret away, so I don't know why that sort of sleaziness was needed, if you know what I mean, or that sort of flirtiness, because he'd never been like that in the whole two films, had he? Obviously, he sees it as a chance to sort of, potentially have the bit of love interest to the film. Obviously, it's a PG thing, so there's only so much you can do, and plus it ruins the whole thing. Is Superman if he's a bit of a sleaze? But it did stick with me, thinking that's a bit. It's a bit too much that I thought, Clark. I think you just need to stay in your lane. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then obviously the next scene is Lex, and I've got a problem with this. Miss Tessmacher in the balloon, supposedly. Sorry, Dave. Go on.
Do you mean in their little cotton shirts, like
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. He's got a bald head. He's probably about -20. and they're in this balloon, which must be one of the most scientifically amazing inventions from Lex Luthor, because it can actually travel hundreds of miles with just a bit of fire, which was probably burn out. Going by
the wind, just always happens to be blowing in the direction that they need it to.
Yeah, it's going due north. It's Tessmacher, due north. Yeah, and it's like he's got a bald head. He's got the prison jumpsuit on. He's not cold one bit. He's not got any ice. It's not, the flame hasn't been taken out. And I'm just thinking, now looking at it, like laughing about it, but you're thinking, he'd have all sorts of gear on, because he'd be free, especially at the height as well. He'd be freezing.
Yeah.
I know it's a throwaway scene, and it's not something that really I should overanalyze, but it just really stuck with me again as a continuity problem.
Yeah, and they're obviously filming it in the studio, aren't they? It's more a special effects thing that they've got the background wrong. I guess they're trying to tell you where he's going, but it just didn't add up, did it?
No. And then you can take it away if you want, Dave, for the next one.
Yeah, so we're back in Niagara Falls, and I think this is the this is the first time we see Lois really suspect Clark as Superman, because he ends up, he gets his glasses steamed up, and so she takes his glasses off him and cleans them, and she gets a second or two to look at him, and then, you know, she's stood there, isn't she, pondering, and then he goes off, and as a kid sort of playing on the other side of the railings, which are highly, very, very safe there. And so she's sort of stood there pondering, but then almost seems to like shake it off. It's like, oh no, that's sort of silly. But then we get the kid again, sort of playing on the wrong side of the railings, and you sort of, everyone's just wandering past. You imagine that? You see a kid doing that, you would absolutely go ballistic, wouldn't you?
Yeah, yeah.
But so anyway, we get the kid falling down, and you know, Superman comes to save the day, and sort of very quickly flies off. But then it hits Lois, doesn't it? She's like, hang about, where's Clark? And he sort of collects some hot dogs, and he comes back with the hot dogs and pretends, you know, that's where I've been all this time. But she's not really having it, is she? She's like, no, every time Superman's around, you're not around.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then we leave it there, and then we're back. So that is one of the fastest balloons in the world, because Lex and Miss Tessmacher are then back up in the Fortress of Solitude, and I guess if you're in the North Pole, you probably don't need to have an alarm or anything.
No,
because they just wander right in there, and there's seemingly no door or anything, but then Lex gets access to all the crystals, doesn't he? And he first, we get this weird scene with this bald fella spouting some poetry, you know.
Trees.
Yeah.
By Joyce, thinking about it.
What was the poem?
It's about a tree. That's what he says. He says, like, trees by Joyce thing, and he starts
in that very, you know, monotone voice. So yeah, I thought it was a bit weird. But the second one, you know, they hit gold, and they get Kal-El's mum, and she starts to educate them on you know, the Phantom Zone, and they're saying, you know, we've put these 3 criminals in. They might, you know, there's just a chance, if there's an explosion in space, they might escape, you know. Well, remember that for later.
No, well, that's what I put now. That's what I was saying to you. You know, about it was almost levels of the Batman TV series.
Yeah.
You know, how they obviously mentioned in the first film that, you know, the Earth is similar to their world, and, you know, obviously he'll be like a king or whatever he is on Earth. But it's the way that they've obviously gone to Earth, or they've found some sort of research. Because when she says that, and she says the only way these criminals will escape is if there is a nuclear explosion. But how would someone on Krypton know what a nuclear explosion is? You know, because it's relative. That's what I mean. Exactly. So it's like, it's relative to, I understand it's the story arc of the film, and it won't make any sense, but it's the way she just like nonchalantly says it, a nuclear explosion or nuclear bomb or whatever she says. And you're like, well, that wouldn't, you know, I know I'm reading too much into it. Like you say, it just is. That line of yours is going to stick with me through the whole of these podcasts, because that line you said last week, it's so true. When you said, I sat there thinking about it, and just thought, you know what, Dave? It just is. You know, you've just got to accept it for what it is. And I think it is that thing, because we're reviewing something so passionately. It means so much to me and you. You've just got to accept that there is artistic license with a lot of these things, because that's I know it's a daft little thing, but it's something that didn't make. And it's the fact that obviously all of a sudden they've got snow gear on. He's got proper gear from nowhere.
Comes out of nowhere, doesn't it? Well, you know, they obviously had it stashed in the balloon somewhere, and didn't think to put it on until they got there and had a change load. Well, obviously we got the weird line, didn't we? That we find out Miss Tessmacher's not been to the toilet for 2 days. I thought that is control. I'm not sure I could go 2 hours these days. You know, 2 days.
Well, I think as well is the way she's dressed. She looks like someone out of Star Wars. She actually looks like that red outfit she's got on is homage to that robot that gets killed at the start. These red ones, it looked like that. The whole outfit's just really bizarre. Like,
I was thinking more James Bondish. It reminded me a bit of the James Bond girls kind of thing around that 60s kind of 60s and 70s era.
Yeah, I think as well is you obviously you go to that scene and one thing I'd mentioned at the start was, and you picked up on this when we were chatting privately, was it's pretty obvious that the scene, obviously it's Gene Hackman, but when they're obviously going across in the little snow drift thing and all that, and it's not Gene Hackman because obviously, like I say, he wouldn't film these scenes have obviously been shot, which I'll get to later. But it's pretty obvious. I can hear it now in his voice that it's not actually him. When the lead, like he does this whole thing with the trees and his mother and all that stuff, and then it's like they go and leave, and you can tell now because I've read up on it that it wasn't him. But as a kid, I never even questioned it. I just thought it was Gene Hackman overdubbing his voice on like two stunt people doing it.
It is quite noticeable, isn't it? When you notice it, it is quite noticeable. So they decide to head south, don't they? Because Lex basically thinks, well, if we've got these three criminals and these superpower beings, they're going to need a contact on Earth to kind of help them out, and he thinks he can work an angle there where he can get some stuff as well. So, yeah, then we're back at Niagara Falls. So Lois has obviously been thinking about, what's just gone down, but she's figured it out now. She's getting quite cocky. She's throwing out all the hints. And one line I quite love, she said, "Yep, your disguise is nearly perfect." And I thought, really? Pair of glasses? That's nearly perfect? I'm not sure I quite agree with you. But so anyway, so she was that confident. She says, she's gonna jump in the Niagara Falls. She's gonna bet her life on it effectively. And so she jumps, and then I think she very quickly regrets it. And I thought it was this bit had me crying, and I don't really. Well, I kind of have an idea why. It's not a completely logical reason, but Clark just shouts out, "Swim! Swim!" And I thought it's a bit like when you do it yourself, you just throw that utterly unhelpful advice. Like if you're watching a football match, score, shoot, save it. It's just utterly unhelpful advice, and it just tickled me for some reason. But we get a little scene, and he obviously he does use his powers to save her, but she doesn't actually notice. He lasers down a tree branch with that heat vision there, and again he's still playing the klutz, isn't he? So when she's coming into the side there, he ends up falling over and being quite clumsy and what have you. So I mean, in Niagara Falls, that must have been absolutely freezing, mustn't it? That water.
It must have been. I mean, I actually like that whole scene, but the only issue I've got with it is the next scene. He tells her anyway, obviously. So it's like you get the whole, not the next scene, the scene after, but you get the whole sort of, he falls in the water, and it's a great scene and everything, and it makes her then start questioning, thinking, why the hell was he doing this? He's obviously not Superman, but it's revealed within the next 5 minutes that he is.
So let's go straight to that, and we'll come back to Zod and co from there.
Yeah.
So anyway, she's feeling a bit dumb, isn't she? She's warmed up, and again, I'm pretty sure she'd be hospitalised.
Yeah,
if you've been in the Niagara Falls water for as long as she was, but anyway, we get the moment that you kind of alluded to earlier. So Clark falls over the bear head and into the fire, and he drops his glasses in there, and he doesn't have his hands in there for that long, does he?
No.
He sort of gets his glasses out, and then Lois kind of saying, "Oh, let me see your hand. You must be burnt." And then course, there's nothing on his hands. So, hey presto, she realizes he must be Superman.
Yeah.
And I get the line. I think it was Lois who said, maybe you subconsciously wanted to do it or something like that, because it's a bit strange, isn't it? You've got Superman and he just sort of trips over a bear into the fire. It just seems a bit weird. But yeah, so he eventually sort of admits it, and she seems okay that she nearly drowned. And she was freezing her buns off, for a few minutes in that water. But she's like, oh, right, well, it is you then. Yeah. So, I mean, what did you make to that whole scene?
I've always liked the scene because it was everything about revealing who he was. But the one thing I was getting at is what you said about Superman 3. There's a little subtle thing which I only noticed watching it this time, and all I've seen that scene probably hundreds of times, Dave, is when he falls and she grabs his hand and she turns it over and she goes, "You are Superman." And he looks at no, and then he fingers his hand and all that. As he walks off and he's got his back to her, I don't know whether you noticed it, but he just does one thing, and I thought it was so clever, is as he's about to take his glasses off and he's sort of like, I'm going to have to tell her now, and he's still got his back to her and that. I thought it's one of the best scenes in the film was he just lifts his shoulders slightly as if he's hunching to one side as Clark Kent, and his whole stature changes. It's like he grows literally about an inch or so, and you just see from behind, you can see his chest going out, and as he turns and he's took the glasses off and stuff, he's like, yeah, he is Superman, and that sort of. And I don't know. I know. To be fair, as I'm saying this, I've actually got the scene on now, sort of sloping to one side, and then all of a sudden he sort of huffs, and then his shoulders come up and everything, and it's quite a powerful scene because as soon as he takes them off, you're thinking, how did she never know it wasn't him? It just really stuck with me, that whole scene. I thought it was very, very clever what Christopher Reeve did.
Yeah. It just expertly executed, wasn't it? And again, as we said last week, I just don't think any of the other guys have quite got that duality that Christopher Reeve had.
No, and it just stuck with me, that thing. I just thought very, very subtle but clever.
Yeah.
Movement of his body, and that's great actor. Sign of a great actor, to be fair.
Absolutely. So, meanwhile, back with Zod.
Yeah.
So we get them. They've been past the moon. They're arriving on Earth, and of course, Non and Ursa land on the land, and Zod just lands in the middle of the lake, and again seems to be surprised by water. we get him rising up, and he can kind of walk on water again. Not sure that's ever been a Superman type power, but okay. And we get the old gag, don't we? We get the fisherman. He sort of looks at his drink and then throws his drink away. That old chestnut.
Yeah. What have I been drinking?
Yeah, exactly. I'll have to stop drinking that. And we get a snake that bites Ursa, don't we? And again, I don't quite know how that works. These guys can stop speeding bullets, but snake fangs can seemingly penetrate them. So she lasers this thing with her heat vision, and she's a bit surprised by it. She's like, "Did you see that?" Yeah. And I just thought it was brilliant. Zod's like, "Yeah, whatever. We've all gone." We've all got those powers. I just thought, brilliant put down. Yeah, it's all right. Don't worry about it. And then is it there or is it later where we get Non? He hasn't quite mastered the old heat vision yet, so he's trying to get it going, but can't quite. It's the
same scene.
It's the same. I was thinking, is it a bit later?
Yeah, no, he picks a snake up and does the same thing. It's like a piece of wood by this time, because obviously she's decapitated it. But it's It's a daft scene because the guy who actually has the alcohol and throws it away, it's someone, I can't think of his name, but he was renowned for playing a drunk.
Oh, really?
Things, yeah, that was like his thing in films and stuff like that. He always plays like someone who's drunk and, and that sort of thing. That was what he's renowned for doing, that sort of, I think I've had too much of this because I'm seeing, I'm seeing people walk on water, but that's why they got him for the scene. I've read that years ago, but yeah, it's a very, and again though, it's another little comedy, little skit that's in there, a little bit of light humour. Even though they've come to take over the world, they've still got time to sort of mess around, if that makes sense. It's the whole tone of the film, but then
sorry to cut across you there, but one of the things I noticed is there's quite a lot of comedy with these three characters. Again, it's weird, isn't it? There were three characters with Lex and co, and then you've got three with Zod and co as well. But there's comedy in and around them now, but they're not comedic themselves.
No,
they're all playing it pretty much dead on. Apart from Non's cradling the little red police light, isn't he? That was the only bit where I could think, they're looking a bit silly there. But everything else, it's more the comedies around them, not them themselves. So we end up in the Deep South. So, well, it's not actually the Deep South, is it? So it is Houston, but it's Houston, Utah, not Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
So again, fortunate when you're coming in from space, and all the ground has the name of the places written on, and you always just go for that same Houston, don't you? It's always the wrong one. So they end up down there, and of course, did you recognise the sheriff?
Oh, he's been in also. He's been in two. Live and Let Die.
Live and Let Die was the one I was thinking. I mean, it was basically. I mean, is this a bit of a James Bond crossover? Because he was basically the same character, I think.
Yeah, he is. He's funny enough. He's just died there about 6 months ago. He's about 97. The actor, righty. But he's in Live and Let Die. And if I don't know if you remember, he's actually in the Man with the Golden Gun. He's the guy in the car when Roger Moore does that loop the loop, when he's chasing after Scaramanga. It's the same. It's the same character because he says to Roger Moore, "You're that secret agent guy, aren't you?" And all that. And so, like you say, it's like maybe because it was filmed at Pinewood. Obviously the other scenes were obviously this is on location somewhere, but again, it probably is a homage to him because it's the same character.
Yeah. But the other thing I noticed is his deputy didn't half look like Frank Skinner.
Yeah.
That's what I was like, that's Frank Skinner. But obviously, Zod thinks that the red light, he doesn't see a lot of red in the universe clearly because he sees the first red thing and it's like, that reminds me of our red Krypton sun. And so, that's why Non tries to hand it. And you get the first one I noticed anyway, the first Zod eye roll.
Yeah.
Which I thought was just brilliant. It's like, what am I doing with this lot? So, but yeah, we get a little demonstration of powers there, don't we? And these guys mean business. And again, less menacing now when you're watching it back. But as a kid, I thought that was pretty menacing there.
Well, one thing I got out of the whole scene was when it drops back down the car, it's obviously on a crane of some sort because he's just destroyed the suspension on that, but yet the suspension makes the car higher when it lands back on because you can tell it's on like some sort of crane. But I don't know if you picked up on this, Dave, and it's something that how, as a bad guy or bad woman in this case, why would Ursa be wearing high heels? It's just something that
comics.
I don't get it. I mean, did they know about high heels on Krypton? Because she's come on planet Earth and she's got up there. I mean, she's almost looking, like that she should be on, somewhere else because the way she's dressed is not for. I'm trying not to say what I was going to say, but you get what I'm. People, if anyone's listening, you get what I'm getting at. But she's got high heels on and like a split in the side of her outfit, and I'm thinking, I just don't get what they were going for with that sort of thing.
Clearly, just showing a bit of leg. again, it's a comic book movie, isn't it? So, some of the costumes, the costumes are more for show rather than being functional.
Yeah,
I think always. So,
yeah.
I didn't notice the high heels. I did notice the obscenely large split down the leg.
I don't know. Maybe she was on Planet Houston. She'd been watching the locals. I don't know.
Yeah, just it's hot. You need to get some air in there.
Yeah, and obviously the next sort of mini scene is Clark lands with Lois at the back at his home, and it's literally a brief 10-second scene, and then we're sort of back in the town. Then they've sort of progressed from the police car into the town, and we've got them two sort of hillbillies arm wrestling.
Yeah, and so again, Ursa, she wants a bit of an arm wrestle, doesn't she? And again, you get a little bit of a Zod eye roll.
Yeah,
it's like, she's got to prove herself again, or whatever. But again, we get more of a demonstration of powers now, don't we? Because she just slams that guy right into the floor.
Well, one thing I'd say, literally just before that, did you ever watch? And I only noticed it this time before he rolls his eyes. What was Zod actually reading? Because he picks up a piece of paper off like the table, and I'm thinking, well, how does he know to read? And he's like, he's got like, as she's sort of doing this scene before he says, sit here, sweet cheeks, and then they go to the arm wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never noticed it before, but watching him thinking, I don't understand what he was doing. He was just like, had a piece of white paper in his hand looking at it while this whole dialogue went around. It was a very bizarre
I think we just have to assume that English, both spoken and written, are just universal. So we can read anything. I mean, it's actually I won't. I was going to mention something in a sec. Oh no, I'll go ahead and say it now. So for the army guide, so basically they're all hell's breaking loose, isn't it?
Yeah,
and the army turn up, and a guy with stars on his shoulder, and of course in the American army those are your generals, and so he looks at the stars on his shoulder and says, so you're a general. So we've got a bit of a rapport thing here, because Zod, he's a general as well.
Yeah,
but how the hell does he know that means he's a general?
He doesn't, does it? That's the thing.
So, again, a lot of the things like reading English, okay, I can get that. Or speaking English, speaking on the moon, I can get all those. But that seems very, very abstract for him to know that. Stars on your shoulder mean you're a general.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, because obviously you've got that scene, and then you've got Clark's there with Lois, and somehow, without smashing it, he can open a bottle of champagne. Well, and what I don't understand about all this, I understand he's supposed to be like wrapped up in love, and this is the first woman he's been able to sort of share, obviously, feelings he's never had. But the whole sort of timeline of this just doesn't make sense. Because he flies off to get stuff for evening meal, but yet doesn't run across a TV screen or something. I just don't understand. It shows him sort of supposed to go to the Brazilian rainforest or wherever he is, for example, picking.
I thought it looked like South America. That's what they were sort of going for, wasn't it? Yeah,
because obviously he's supposed to be on that side of the world, but I think I don't know. I just don't understand how
well, they're in the North Pole, aren't they? So it's quite a long way to South America. A really long way, I'd say. But when the story needs him to be super fast, he's super fast. But I thought it was really weird, that, wasn't it? It's like a few seconds of him picking flowers. That's a bit weird. But,
well, I think from there, obviously, it comes back to that scene, and they're having something to eat. And I know it sounds daft, but it was when it sort of comes back and you get the general scene and all that, and he's like you were just saying, he rips all that stuff. But the reporter says something really bizarre. He says, we're in the town, and exaggerated reports are there's 123 people, but now there's 3 more. And I'm thinking, exaggerated reports. It just didn't. I don't know. It just when I listened to it, thinking it doesn't sit well with me. That it doesn't even make. Why would there be exaggerated reports? There's 123 people. I don't know why. I just picked it out of my little cutie.
Isn't it?
Yeah. There's a real strange.
Not as bizarre though. When Zod's levitating that guy.
Yes.
And you get the kid, right?
Yeah.
They're in Houston, Utah, right? And we've just seen we've had some arm wrestling with some hillbillies. We've got the old sheriff who's about as deep south as you can get. And you have this little kid. He's like, Please, sir, please let my father down.
Please, mister. Please, mister. Yeah. Please, Mr. General.
Is that how they talk in the Deep South? I've not really been, but they're a lot more English than I thought they were.
Yeah. And one of the famous things about that scene is when he drops him, you can clearly see the crash marks under the supposed sort of mud that he falls. So as he drops, it's like one of them big. It's one of the big sort of Easter eggs, like if everyone, like from years ago, even when I was a kid, you used to rewind that bit because when he falls, I know how they filmed it. They filmed it on a crane, and it dropped. He's like hoisted up, around his waist, and obviously you can't see it, and they've superimposed another scene on, and he drops, but you can clearly see as he hits the deck, and he makes that weird noise that it's like a some sort of simulated crash mat with a load of mud on top of it. Yeah. But yeah, and obviously the next scene from there is he's got it goes to Clark, and he's basically speaking to his mother about he's fell in love, and the one thing that sticks in my head about that though is just before Lois says to him, I'll just go and slip in something more comfortable. But it's like, well, he's picked her up from nowhere and flew her. I didn't see a trouble
got that as well. From where are you gonna get this more comfortable attire?
yeah. It's a bizarre passage of events because she didn't have a carry bag with her when they were flying there, did she? So we assume that he's nipped back to Metropolis to get her clothes or something. I just don't know. I mean, again, this whole little section is a bit like what I said last week on episode 1 when they had to sort of shoehorn in 10 minutes of stuff very quickly, like when I said about revealing that, he went from young Superman to go into, obviously, the Fortress, and then he changes them, which is supposed to be over a 12-year period if we're going off the proper timeline. And this whole segment of him just suddenly deciding he didn't want to be Superman, when he's literally, it never sits with me well. I understand why they do it because it's making him human and it adds to the next few scenes, but he just give it all up so quickly.
It was quick, wasn't it? And I think what came across, I thought again, Reeve did a pretty good job. So when he brought Lois back, he was just like a big kid, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Big kid, you come to my house, I'll sort of show you around and stuff. And I thought he did a good job of conveying that. But it was pretty quick, to suddenly decide, right, I've got to give up all my powers. And we've just literally, I've just given up my secret like 5 minutes ago, but I'm pretty sure nothing's going to go wrong. I'm certain about this one.
The only thing I picked from that scene, which I thought was very good, and even to this day as a special effect, is when he's in the chamber changing, and obviously all of a sudden he's got a pair of pants and a white shirt on, and his hair's changed. But the way they superimposed him as Superman, and it's like he drops his head and his hands drop as he moves, as Christopher Reeve as Clark as a human out of there. Superman's left and the silhouette of his hands dropping as if to say he's dead. I thought that was really, really clever.
Yeah.
Special effects. Even to this day and age with special effects, I thought that was a really, really well done piece.
I think the effects of him having all his powers stripped away is pretty freaky as well, wasn't it? It looked a bit it looked pretty dated, looking at it now. But I remember at the time thinking it was a bit freaky, that.
Yeah, and then obviously he pans to him going to a bed, which is like a hammock, and all of a sudden he's got a bed there. Like
there was no time wasted, was there? I mean,
No.
get rid of your powers, right? Come on, let's do this.
Yeah, I'll show you how super I am. Yeah, it's just really bizarre. And then, I tell you what I've got, Dave, because the very next scene is one of the scenes in the whole film where I just think, please, somebody sit me down, explain to me how this happened, but how General Zod, Ursa, and Non have got these powers which you've never seen, but they can actually change Mount Rushmore in about 5 seconds to their faces. Can you explain to me how that happened?
No. I mean, it's iconic, though, isn't it? I mean, I always remember that bit.
I do as well.
And again, it's such an iconic thing that they do there. And again, I guess that you're supposed to think they're using their heat vision with, sculptor-like precision. It's just, I think one of those things I'm okay with. I could just say that they were going for a particular tone, there, and it's just, right, we're in charge now. And, obviously destroying some of the previous great presidents that have ruled, and now it's us. That was what I sort of took from that one.
No, I'd take the same thing, because as a kid, it was always one of them things like they're taking over the world. It made so much sense, but it was just the way now you're thinking, that was amazing. That they even got away with that as a scene, if that makes sense. Like to say, well, it just worked. And it did. It just worked. Even now it works as a scene, And then you pan, and obviously Clark and Lois are in bed together, and there's a bit of dialogue there. And they've obviously, they've got to know each other a bit more. And then you pan to the three of them go in the White House and just basically take it apart,
But just before that, right, there's a line in there. Because while Clark and Lois are being lovey-dovey and whatever, obviously Zod and Co. are they're destroying First Houston, and then while that's going on, we go back to the White House. So before we get to the White House, and the president sat there, and the guy's like, "Where's Superman? What's he doing?" Like, I think it could only be better if he was sat down, with a big bag of Cheetos or something, eating them. It's like, come on, Superman, for God's sake, fix this, will you? What are you doing? I thought it was really like a bit of a teenager sort of reaction. What's he doing? It just really, really made me laugh. And these guys, unfortunately, one of the side effects of Superman coming saving everyone is that everyone else doesn't have to do their job, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. And I do like the scene when they're in the White House, and obviously that guy is supposedly the president, and obviously, he kneels. And I think that's pretty clever with Zod. And it's a good I always think it's one of the best bits of dialogue in the film when he says, like, no man who, can
quickly.
Yeah, kneels so quick he can control so many people or rule so many people. And then obviously the real president comes from the back. The only problem I've got with the real president is the hairpiece he's got. But other than that, I think the whole...
Still kneels pretty quickly, though, doesn't he? I mean,
he does.
All he does is he says there's another bloke who won't kneel to you, but, here we go.
and I think as well, he's got obviously the guy who's supposed to be him and who's acted as him is just some office staff guy or whatever he is. I don't know. But then he comes and he's sharply dressed, the president. He's not got his suit jacket on, but he's got his waistcoat and like a tailored suit on, to say, yeah, I am the president. I mean, I still don't understand what difference that would have made even if he'd done it. And I understand it was a good little scene, but it just never, again, it was another one that you sort of thinking, I just don't know why that was in there, really, because I don't know. It's just a weird one. Well, I'll tell you what, a bit of an Easter egg is, do you remember, this is where I was saying that he was filmed in tandem with the first.
Yeah.
In the first film where Lex Luthor blows up that car for Miss Tessmacher to sort of...
on the floor. Before the old sort of assault scene.
Yeah. Well, Clark and Lois drive into the diner, and it shows them sort of driving through the Rockies or wherever they are in America, and it's the same car. So it's the green Dodge, I think it is, as they're driving, and it looks pretty much close to where Lex blows up. So it's obviously sort of a stored scene that they've used this car for like location shots. So they use that as that's them. You don't obviously see them in the car, and the next minute they pull up at the diner, and we get that thing where that Rocky turns up, and that woman's like, "Oh, it's Mr. Wonderful."
Yeah.
And I must admit, from this point on, for me, what sets the whole film apart from this scene onwards, this is where the film comes into its own for me, and I could sit there and watch from this scene onwards, because it just, I don't know why, all the stuff I've mentioned in the past, and then I mentioned over this last hour or so of the review, it doesn't matter. I know we can pick holes in it and I'll have a laugh and we've had a good joke, but for me, this is what makes Superman 2 one of my favourite superhero films, because it's like, he gets a kick in, you know, he's trying to sort of stick up for his girlfriend, and that guy obviously sideswipes him when they're going outside, you know, and he does the honorary thing, like, you know, would you care to step outside? I mean, I've never tried that where I live before, but I'm sure they wouldn't wait for me to go outside, you know.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, he's supposed to still got that Superman thing about him, and even though he's going to try and give this guy a kick in, he's going to do it the honourable way, and it's going to be, you know, Dukes at dawn. But I just love the whole setting of that and how he finds out about Zod. I don't know how you felt, Dave, but I just love this whole segment of the film now.
Yeah, I think I remembered him not having his powers for a lot longer. Yeah. And that's possibly because as a kid, you know, you're more affected by him not having his powers for longer. Watching it now, I think I'd like to see him have his powers, having not have his powers for a lot longer than he did do.
Yeah.
But because ultimately, I mean, he gets his face slammed through a glass pane or whatever. You know, he basically gets beat up once. I don't know. I didn't quite get, how did they get down there? You know, because they flew up to the fortress and, you know, seemed to be walking back or something. And so, you know, after getting beaten up once, you know, he decides, he needs his... Oh, no, that's it. He sees Zod, doesn't he? He sees Zod and...
on the tele.
Come to me, Superman, if you dare. I defy you.
Yeah, kneel before Zod.
Before Zod, yeah. So then he decides, oops, messed up here. So, you know, we get a little bit of... it's almost like, you know, the old Hulk TV series, wasn't it? You know, he's walking back up to the fortress on his own. No one will pick him up, and it's all very sad. And our heroes, you know, down in the dumps and whatever. So, yeah, and then he gets pretty quickly. So they didn't get too far from the fortress. You know, and we get quite an emotional scene, don't we? He's shouting "Father," and you know, he sees a green crystal, which obviously means something. Means he can get his powers back, presumably. You know, so I guess we then go into back to the White House, don't we? And we see after, you know, General Zod's been lusting for power for so long, but actually they've got it and they're a little bit bored. You know? Then that's where we get Lex, you know, and he makes his plea around. He makes his deal where he can get Australia and he'll deliver to them the son of Jor-El. You know, because he's just learned, hasn't he? You know, all about the Kryptonians and what have you. And then somehow Lois has got back from the fortress. And
she's doing a job,
And she's across in Metropolis. You know, and she's very clearly upset about Superman. But how did you get there? So I don't know. But yeah, she's pretty upset clearly, and you know, she's like, Superman will be around, whereas everyone else is, you know, where's Superman? And then we get again another. For me, it was just iconic where you've got Non basically tearing through the Daily Planet, you know, and knocking things over. And again, you know, by today's standards, not the best effects, but Non's the muscle, isn't he? So you just see him just be that brute, basically. And the one thing, and again, it jarred with me a bit, he knocks Perry White out via a polyester ceiling.
I always think that, because we know what they are in offices. They're just... I know.
Bizarre, isn't it? And then there's a great line, isn't there, from Hackman? He's like, because he's just sneering at everyone, and he's like, even with all this accumulated knowledge, when will you learn to use a doorknob? Did you, just brilliant.
Well, a couple of things on that scene which I found I'd never really noticed before is Jimmy Olsen is just randomly taking pictures of them all. Like the raving cameraman that he is. He's photography. He's just there, just taking pictures up from like a yard away, and they're not bothered at all. They're just like, there's nothing to it. He's just there, like taking pictures of all of them. But then, what I found, one of the scenes is, when she then punches Ursa, Lois, when they were filming that scene, and later on, she actually knocked Ursa unconscious, the English actress.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Margot Kidder went through with a punch and actually knocked her unconscious when they were filming it. So, because obviously it's supposed to be she hits her and she's like made of stone, isn't she?
Yeah.
And this scene, the whole part of this scene, I absolutely love when Superman comes. I just love that scene.
So this whole set piece is just brilliant, isn't it? Because we get, we know because we've seen the film, but at the time when you saw the green crystal, because of the rouse and music, you kind of knew that was a good thing, but you didn't quite know he'd get his powers back so quick. And again, would you care to step outside, General?
Yeah,
whatever it is he said, and then you get that "Come to me, son of Jor-El, kneel before Zod." Just the next kind of 5 minutes, that whole showdown is just brilliant, and I love the way, initially you've got kind of Non and Ursa ganging up on Superman, and then General Zod is just standing back and watching it, isn't he? Just seeing how it all unfolds.
I think just before that happens, or what I love is we've still got the Bill Cosby thing over Zod's left shoulder again. He's still there.
He's still
lying about. But it's the line from Hackman where he just says, he puts his hand on his head and goes, "Thank God." And then he looks at him, so he goes, "Get him." I just love that scene, because it's like he isn't really all that bad. He's scared of him. And he knows Superman's going to help him. He's
trying to manipulate them, isn't he? But very quickly, it must be like 20 times Zod says, kill him. So he's always walking that line between, I can really get something out of aligning with these guys, but, one wrong move and I'm dead.
Yeah. And it is, the whole fight sequence is great. And it's not really a fight as such. It's just sort of like them flying and throwing things at each other and things like that, and a couple of things. But the whole segment of that, and I remember watching the making of it years ago, a lot of the scenes and stuff a lot of it's from the first film, a lot of the segments with the people and stuff like that. Obviously, there's stuff filmed for this, which made sense. But the one thing that it does sort of what I could never understand about the whole scene is he has a fight with him, he gets the better of them, they get the better of him, and then that girl sat next to Lois is like, the big one's as strong as Superman. She gives her a dig.
Quite like the fact that, Superman's getting beaten up, don't she?
Yeah, I don't understand that, considering they're taking over the world and they're going to...
It did seem a bit odd.
It was a strange thing again, and Lois gives her a dig and all, and you've got all that thing where, he gets sort of, they think he's dead. And what I cannot understand is why everyone wanted to go and attack these people. They've got superhuman things. They know they can't help them, but everyone on the street just thinks, I'll tell you what, safety in numbers, let's go and have a go at him. I just think...
So just before that, I mean, Zod figures out, doesn't he? Because Superman's got the upper hand. He's doing quite well, but then Zod figures out, well, actually his weakness he cares for these human beings. So they start targeting them.
Yeah.
And that's when it sort of changes. And then there's that brilliant scene, isn't there, where they lift up the bus. And again, I'm watching it now, but I'm kind of watching it with kids' eyes as well. So I can see they're clearly not holding it up, and it looks pretty fake, but don't care, and they throw the bus at him, and they seem to think, that Superman's dead. Again, seeing what he's been through before, it seems a bit of a leap, but okay, he's winded at least, and then that's when the crowd sort of decide, let's have a go at him. Now, these guys have just killed Superman.
That's what I mean.
So, yeah, it does seem a little bit of a stretch. But I tell you what, it reminded me of it. There's a scene in Spider-Man 2, isn't there, where basically Spider-Man's knocked unconscious and
on the train.
On the train, yeah, and Dr. Octopus, and the guys sort of stand up for him, it's like, you want him, you've got to go through us, kind of thing. And it reminded me of that.
Yeah, I think I've never realised that. Good point, actually.
With Dr. Octopus, and I know he's got the arms and stuff, but you can kind of, he's a man. Take away the arms, he's just a man. These are 3 superpowered Kryptonians, and who've just been flying around the place and beaten up and killed, they think's killed Superman. So, a different level there.
And plus, as well, with the whole of that scene, you've got loads of comedy things in it. Like, you've got a guy whose wig comes off, and then a guy's on the phone, and he's chatting on the phone, and the phone's going down the street, and he's laughing his head off as the phone drags some bloke about 60 odd. And then
this is slapstick dialed up to 11, isn't it?
Yeah. And then
they're stood there. Again, the Kryptonians, they're stood there, they're just blowing with their super breath. They've got big lungs because they just blow for ages, while we have all these slapstick moments there, but they're being deadly serious, and it's the comedy going on around them.
Yeah, which is just, it's funny, but when, like, the KFC guy comes out of KFC and all his food just goes, it's just like, these guys are going to get, and then as I watch it now, there's a guy on skates going backwards with like a red sort of shiny snooker jacket on of some sort, like it just doesn't.
It is bizarre, isn't it? And I should mention as well, I always found it a bit weird, and I texted you earlier in the week about the cigarettes, and that when I was growing up, there was always these adverts, and it was I could probably try and find it on YouTube and put them in the show notes, but it was always like anti-smoking. And it was always these Superman adverts, and there was this, this villain. He's trying to get kids to start smoking, and Superman comes down on that. So for me, growing up, Superman was always very anti-smoking. But then you got this massive product placement of this Marlboro sign where Superman gets thrown in, who then in turn throws Zod into a massive Coca-Cola sign.
And he goes home run. Yeah. I thought that product placement.
Yeah, but the Coca-Cola one, okay, but just, having something like that in a kids' movie essentially was just a bit jarring. And I think they changed the laws pretty soon after that, so that you couldn't advertise cigarettes in kids' movies. Or I'm not sure if they can anywhere now.
No, and then obviously we get the scene. Superman feels guilty because he realises that the more they fight, it's quite a good bit of acting actually for Christopher Reeve, because he realises that he's going to make himself look like a coward, but the only way to sort of get rid of him is to take him away from the humans, because he cares so much. So I think that as a scene, he's great. And then we get the, why don't we take his favourite? And we get it when he earns his gold of,
The thing that I thought was weird was like, Zod has got this burning passion. He absolutely hates Jor-El, and he doesn't just hate Jor-El. He hates everything to do with him. Even his offspring, even his heirs. He hates them, and he's going to kill them. And he gets back to the Daily Planet, and he's like, "Next time, we'll kill him." And it takes Lex to sort of say, "What are you on about? Just finish him off."
Yeah.
Then he's like, "We will crush the son of our jailer."
Yeah.
But I thought, after this, these guys had thrown you in the Phantom Zone or whatever. He kind of let him off a little bit, next time we'll kill him.
Yeah, and it's very much like a Dr. Claw moment off Inspector Gadget. Next time, Gadget, like that sort of thing. We'll get him, and I do. And then you've got the flying scene, and they get to the fortress, and there's a scene coming next, which they land and they're sort of positioned in a sort of triangle formation against Superman when he comes out. But it's this thing, and I've read loads of it online, and even in Family Guy, they reference it taking the mick. What is the point when Nom goes at Superman? What was that S he throws at him?
The Super Cling film.
Yeah. What does it actually do? Because you'll have to see the Family Guy one. I watched it today. It's brilliant. Like, it shows Superman.
I've seen it. Where he goes, "No, that was a minor inconvenience."
yeah, and he's on the floor. It's just like, it has no significance to anything. It doesn't sort of stop his powers or anything. It just sort of stops him in his tracks. So that it's not like he's lost his powers. And I think I've said it to you. There's a massive Easter egg in this scene. So I won't go two things. We get to the DS. Then obviously we have this thing then where it's never been mentioned in any of the films, but all of them can sort of teleport, and Superman can be like 3 or 4 places at once.
When I said we talked probably a couple of hours ago now, we talked about whether Lester had ever read a comic book. And I said, I'll talk about something after. This is that.
Yeah.
Right? This scene, nothing to me makes sense about it. If you just let the scene unfold and just go with it, ride it along, okay, I quite like it in that respect, but I can't rationalize it because none of it makes sense.
No.
And when they're teleporting, and he says, "I used to play this game as a kid." Hang about, you were in Kansas. You were playing this game in Kansas?
Yeah.
And no one figured it out. It's as if they forgot he grew up in Kansas and assumed he grew up in Krypton. Yeah,
and then obviously one of them, I'm just watching it as we say, because I said I've had the film running as we do this, is where Nom jumps on sort of like a porcelain version of Superman, and he flies through a wall, and it's like, and then we get Zod doesn't think that he's the real sort of Superman, and as he goes to grab him, he nonchalantly sticks his hands out and he gets him in a headlock, and Nom and Ursa have got sort of Lois ready to tear a limb from limb. And then from here we get, which I think is the best scene of the whole film, but we also get one of the worst Easter eggs, because obviously General Zod's there, and Luthor gives away that, Superman's there chatting to him, and sort of lays the foundation and the trap of, if you can get him to go in here, I'll change to people like you, like he's obviously already done. And the whole Zod scene, Neil before Zod, and he goes in the chamber, he changes, Lois is crying, it's all over for him, he comes out. And then I remember watching it for the first time, obviously when I was a lot younger, and I even then thinking, he's still got the suit on, but you don't twig or cotton on if you've never seen it before. And it lays seeds then to what is the best scene in the film, where he kneels, he's hesitant, but it's also one of the worst Easter eggs, is because as he lifts and crushes Zod's hand, he's got the biggest sweat patches under his arms, Christopher Reeve, which is like...
I'm not quite sure that's an Easter egg.
No, I don't know if it's an Easter egg, but it's a mistake. Or call it a cream egg then, Dave.
Oh, dear. But you know what? I mean, again, in terms of going on that emotional roller coaster, so even though it's in the film, God knows how many times, when I just try and immerse myself in the movie at the time. And it's only after I have sort of more analytical thoughts. When you think your hero, you've already seen him. You've seen what happens. And he basically gets beaten up by a yokel. Zod is going to make him his lapdog pretty much. You think, what is he going to do? And then you get the old handy crush thing. He lifts him up, and you just think, oh yeah, what I don't know what's going on, but this is great.
Yeah.
But when so my son watched Superman 2 with me when I watched it this time, and I wasn't really expecting him to enjoy it too much. And again, I don't know if it's kids now, but when Superman gets into the chamber, I sort of says, "Oh, he's done for now, isn't he? We've seen this happen before. We know what happens." And my son's like 7, and he goes, "Maybe he's tricked them."
Is that what he said?
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, I couldn't believe it. I was like, no, I'm not having that. I'm not having you just work that out. But I guess, I don't know, they watch story-driven things all the time, I guess. But I had no idea, when I saw that for the first time. And again, every time you watch it, it's just brilliant.
It's a great scene.
The thing is, though, when Man of Steel came out, there was a lot of hoo-ha around how he dealt with Zod in that movie.
Yeah.
Right? But here he kills Zod, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You don't see it, because he's just plummeted to his death, effectively. But he's killed him.
Yeah. Yeah, he has killed him because, you never see him again, do you? And even, obviously then Nom goes to fly. He goes down some sort of cloudy ravine where Zod's gone. And then obviously she then gives Thingy a crack, doesn't she, Ursa, Lois?
Yeah.
A good little line, actually, you're a real pain in the neck, and gives her. But obviously then you got Hackman sort of narrating the scene, what's just happened, which I find is a good bit of
just in
dialogue.
Case you're in any doubt. And it's good that we got Hackman back, isn't it? So he was obviously there for the first shoots, because it is so obviously not him when they first get to the fortress and they drop him off, and he's like, "Hey, you ever heard of parachutes?" Yeah. It's just so obviously not him. But I mean, again, I'm trying to think. Probably as a kid, I probably didn't notice, but there was something not quite right. Whereas now, when it's not him, it's just so. They said they got an impressionist or something. Not a very good one.
I think me and you could have done a better one.
Hey, if he was French. But anyway, so
I'm going to keep listening to that French bit over and over this week, Dave. Absolutely brilliant. Absolute ace. But no, and obviously the scene ends. Luthor's trying to do a bit of pleading with him, and I had you all the time and all this, and it's a great little scene. You see Superman actually lose his rag with him, and then it pans to we're back in Metropolis, and she's upset as he flies off. And then there's a couple of I think the next scene's pretty poor, really. Is you've got the whole thing with Lois and Clark, and obviously she now knows he's Superman. She's fell in love with him, and we come back to the Daily Planet, and it's quite a powerful scene up to the point when he kisses her, and
the super kiss.
Yeah, the whole thing again, a bit like we were saying about the sort of telepathic transportation thing that's just gone on, where they've all of a sudden he can now transport himself into different sort of areas and places, and we've never seen this sort of telepathic superpower. He can now obviously kiss people and erase the memories, which is bizarre because he only erases the one memory that he's Superman. So I don't know how.
I think it's again when I was saying about the different writers, essentially Superman in these movies has just got whatever powers he needs to have to make the story go along. It's as simple as that. So he's got the power to kiss someone and make them just forget anything.
You're going to pull that back.
Maybe you could say that, if anything, because we know he's got heat vision, maybe he's like injected some radiation into her and burnt off a bit of her memories or something like that. But that sounds a little bit sinister, doesn't it? So no, he can now kiss people and make them forget stuff. And full stop. Yeah.
And that's it basically. That's just...
for me, it was never really explained. Why couldn't they be together? I mean, there's a... I don't know if you've ever seen Mallrats. I'm not going to go into detail on it here, but, you know, there's a bit of a scene where they're discussing just the biological incompatibility of, you know, Superman, if he had all these powers and stuff, could not, you know, be with a woman because it would just destroy the woman.
Yeah.
So was it for that? Or again, I mentioned Spider-Man before. You got a little bit of dialogue, didn't you, where, you know, he realized that, well, if he's with someone, he's putting them in danger. So therefore, I'm going to choose to be on my own, and then I don't protect the people. I'm not going to put the people I care about in danger. Whereas here, I just didn't really get why they were separate. But I thought Kidder's performance in this was, like you say, it was pretty choking.
Good. Very good.
I must admit, there's some scenes in here, though, she doesn't look well.
No.
You know, she looks really gaunt and sort of anorexic-y.
Yeah. But, malnourished, really, sort of thing. I know. Yeah. Whether she struggled with her weight and it was a case of, obviously, they expect you to be a certain weight or look. Obviously, for the part of Lois, I don't know. It may have been, because it wasn't all as thingy back then, was it, as it is now, sort of the body shaming. So maybe it's that. And then, obviously, I think it was a great scene. The whole thing was a great, up until the kiss. And then we pan to the next scene, and he's gone back to the diner, and good old Rocky's there having his plate of slop again, and Superman just decides to, start taking names, doesn't he? I love that whole scene, though. It's just a stupid scene, and he doesn't really get hurt or anything, but it's as if to say, I haven't forgotten about you, pal. I bear a grudge,
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Isn't Superman a bit above that? And again, at the time, you're like, yeah, get him. He's the guy who beat up our hero. And I do like that line. I've never seen garbage eat garbage before. Yeah. It's not even that clever, or it's not funny. I don't know why. I just quite like it. It sticks in my mind. But, he's Superman, isn't he? So, he doesn't have to do that.
No. I know he doesn't. And then obviously he goes to the White House, puts the roof back on and says, sorry, Mr. President, I'll never let you down again. And then he pans to the space and he actually smiles at the camera. There's obviously cameras in space, and he smiles as the last sort of segment, and we get the end of the film and the credits roll. And I think we'll get to the reviews, but as an overall thing, I enjoyed it. And that, like I say, from the first diner scene to the end, it happens in about 20 minutes, but that makes the whole film for me.
Yeah, I do like it. I do like that line he has that, again, felt quite sincere. When he's putting the bit on the top of the White House, and he says, "Sorry, I've been away, Mr. President. I won't let you down again." Yeah, it just felt quite sincere, and so yeah, very good.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it earlier, and I know it's been a long one this again, but it's been an enjoyable one, Dave. But we both agreed that, as we said, I'd watched the Richard Donner cut, and before we give our sort of final review scores and finish up the podcast, is just to give a couple of things that I took from the Donner cut. Now, Richard Donner, as I said, he got sacked before they sort of could finish the second one and all that. And in about 2004, Margot Kidder was being interviewed, and she was the one who created all this Richard Donner cut for Superman 2, because she said in the interview, somewhere in a vault, Richard Donner filmed that much stuff, he could actually finish Superman 2 how he wanted to, because he'd done that much of it. And then from there was like an online petition to Warner Brothers for them to sort of fund it and to get it released, because fans wanted to see what Richard Donner's sort of vision was, because it was supposed to continue straight on from the first. And then in 2006, he was asked back to Warner Brothers and to remaster. So with the cut, the Richard Donner cut, the first thing you get is he got like 8 tons worth of film reel that was all stored away and never used. And he had to sort of go through it meticulously. The only problem was there was one guy overseeing the project. It was literally Richard Donner, someone else together, and this guy. And then obviously they'd have a couple of little, engineers or whatever to put it together. So because it was incomplete, when you watch it, you get like a thing at the start saying, this was an incomplete film. This is how Richard Donner vision was for the film, but it is an incomplete film. So from there, what you've got is when you're watching it, there's a scene in it which is quite powerful, but it's a screen test of Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder before they filmed the first one. It's in about 1975, 76. So Christopher Reeve is really thin. He's got the haircut. He's got the thickest glasses you've ever seen. They're like Deirdre Barlow glasses, really thick glasses. And it's basically, it all goes from there. But a couple of notes to the Donner one, Dave. After watching it, my honest opinion is, even though I just said to you earlier in the week that I was going to watch it, and people were saying, and I saw the reviews when it come out in 2006, that it was how the second one should have gone and it was better than the theatrical release and all that. My personal opinion, and this is not just because I rate it so highly, is it's, again, your line, why bother, really? That's what I got out of it. There's a couple of scenes that I think should have been in the main film, but other than that, I didn't take anything else out of it other than, it's Superman 2 with a slightly different arc to it. Obviously, they did say there were certain scenes he may have changed if he'd got chance to actually finish it, and rewrote certain things, but they could only work on the Donner cut with what they had. So at the start of the film, that whole thing I was getting at with Marlon Brando, where I said Zod and that were in that room and Brando's not there and they're all going guilty, guilty, and they get sent to the Phantom Zone. Well, the actual scene in the Donner cut is Brando's in there and Brando is talking to them. And obviously he has the final say as the final person, to send him away and everything. And he walks away. And it made more sense, that whole scene, because it sort of added on to the first film and it made sense how they got sent. So I actually think that obviously you've got to watch it. You're only going off what I'm sort of from my eyes. But I thought the whole thing with Brando actually made sense. And for the fact of the studio being very petty or whatever with whatever was going on, that scene could have been so much more at the start with Zod. And Zod says a couple of good lines. The whole thing about kneel before Zod is because in that scene, he actually says, when they're going to send him away, he's saying to him, Jor-El, you will kneel before me. And if you don't kneel before me, your heir will kneel before me, and all this. So it's like, that's where the whole thing comes from. Kneel before Zod.
Yeah.
And then, but what you do get then, I'm not joking, Dave, obviously this, I said the start of the second one is great when it has like a recap, and we both said it, recap of the first. It recaps the whole first film, but it goes on for about 10 minutes. The whole, I'm not exaggerating, it goes on for ages. To the point where I actually fast forwarded it, because after 5 minutes of watching it, I was thinking, I'm not seeing through this. And I kept fast forwarding it. And then obviously, there's a few of the timeline things are not there, because obviously what it was, the timeline of the film is that whole Paris scene isn't in the Donner cut, because Zod was supposed to get released at the end of the first film by the nuclear warheads.
I think that's the main thing I'd heard about that cut, and it almost it seems like a what if type story. So
yeah,
what I mean by that, so Marvel had this whole series of comics which were called What If.
Yeah,
it was all like parallel universe stuff. So what if Spider-Man didn't get bitten by a radioactive spider, or what if something else? And it's like, as soon as you've borrowed or you've taken bits out of the second movie and put them into the first, that Donner cut is just, it could have never been released like that.
No, No, and like one of the first scenes as well in the film is Lois is just randomly sat there in like the typing pool, and he's going on Perry White about how fast Clark Kent is at typing and all this.
Mm-hmm.
And she just turns round and Clark Kent's talking to some of his arms folded. She gets the paper and Superman's stood in the same position with his arms crossed in his cape and like a black and white picture. And she just randomly starts looking at Clark going, hang on a minute. She just doodles Clark's hat, his glasses and a suit on the Superman suit and goes and starts holding it up across the room going, oh my, that's him. And you're thinking, what? And then the next scene is Clark comes over and she's like, yeah, you're super and all this when Perry White's talking to him and like nudging him in the stomach. And they leave to go in another office. And then she just decides, you're Superman. And obviously the whole Niagara Falls scene where she says that never happens in this thing properly. She just jumps out the window in Metropolis. And Clark Kent's looking down and she's convinced he's Superman. So again, it's a bit like the Niagara Fall thing.
Mm-hmm.
He then shoots downstairs, looks around as she's flying down, and then sort of X-ray uses his vision, he's like his red eye thing, and this sort of canopy comes down and he blows up to her to stop her fall. So she slows down, and then hits his canopy and lands on this fruit stall covered in veg and stuff, and the next minute pans up and he's supposed to be in the window above, you know, like, and it takes off descent. Yeah. It's just one of them scenes where you're like, no, I think the Richard Lester version was better. And then I won't ruin it too much, but there's only a couple of other scenes that are worth noting that I thought made sense. The whole reveal, having been Superman, was going to be what they used in the screen test, which I've got on the DVDs, is he's at Lois's, they're supposed to be in Niagara Falls. They go into a room, which is not like the room they ended up with the pink bloody bear and that. And she's got an inkling he's Superman. So she sits there and she's saying, you're Superman. I never get, and he's like, no, don't be stupid. And I told you this the other day, but she gets a gun out, points it at him, fires at him. And as she fires at him, he stands tall like Superman dead quickly. Still got his glasses on and the whole Clark Kent suit on. And he like sort of goes, oh, you know, damn, takes his glasses off and then says to her, you know, you do realise if that had been real bullet, Clark Kent would have been dead. And she went, what, with a blank? And that's him revealed his secret. And that was going to be the whole... See, I mean, these scenes are actually on YouTube, Dave. Even if you didn't want to watch the film, you can actually get hold of these on the YouTube. And then the only other scene, and the timelines are slightly skewish because there's certain things that wouldn't have been in the Donner cut. And obviously Richard Lester threw in a lot of the slapstick stuff, and that is the whole point when he goes back to the fortress after he's got beaten up. That whole scene's the same when he gets beat up because Richard Donner filmed that, well, that Rocky guy, and he goes back. But when he goes back to the fortress, he finds the green sort of USB thing, as you call it, you know, the crystal. But then he ends up talking to Jor-El, Marlon Brando, and that's why there's no logical explanation for, in the theatrical one, the green crystal, and then you get them going through the Daily Planet wrecking it, and he comes back, he's Superman. Because what happens is he gets the crystal, puts it in them machines again, it starts firing up again, and Jor-El appears as like a face hologram, not a bagel, as Brando wanted, but then it comes to light that he wants his powers back, and there's a dialogue between them, and you know, Superman's, I mean, don't make sense, he's still covered in blood from the fight, which obviously would have happened days earlier, but he's still got the same blood on his face and that went from the fight. But he does the whole scene, and then Marlon Brando comes out of the hologram as a person and says to him, like, you know, you'll never see me again. And he puts his hand on his shoulder and basically passes him back his powers. Now, I thought that made more logical sense to put in, but there was also a few scenes with Lex Luthor and Miss Tessmacher, which goes by your theory. When they're in the balloon, she like cuddles him saying, I love you. Why do I love you and everything? Which was sort of why they obviously never alluded to that they were a couple, but it's sort of shown in these. And then there's a few scenes where they're sort of on them little ski things, which makes more sense why the balloon wouldn't have travelled all that way, because there's other scenes. And then at the end, when Lex Luthor is trying to say, Superman, I had you back and all that stuff in the fortress, because the fortress plays out slightly differently. The Arctic police are there to arrest him, and there's actually an Arctic 4x4 outside the fortress. with Superman.
Okay.
So that made no sense at all. So I would say we'll watch it. We did say at some point we're going to review it, but for me, it's not made any difference how I thought it would.
Yeah, and I think when initially we said maybe we'd review it separately in a separate show, but I think given that it is just this parallel universe, this what if story, I'm satisfied, to be honest. I may at some point just look up those scenes on YouTube, maybe. But again, for me, I think it's got to be the theatrical release. It actually sounds. I mean, they should just leave it alone now.
Yeah.
But it actually sounds like probably the best Superman 2 movie you could get from that footage. It's probably a mishmash of both the Donner and the Lester stuff.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's given me a bit more respect for Lester, even though the fans are adamant about, Richard Donner was treated this way, blah, blah, blah. It's just by what happened, it made both films what they were. And for me, I'm satisfied that if I never watch the Richard Donner one again, I'm not going to lose any sleep of it. The only line that and you straight away loses the whole argument of the film is when Superman comes outside the Daily Planet when he's got his powers back, and you've got the famous General, do you care to step outside?
Yeah.
So obviously he's just used that line so that Rocky will beat up. Superman comes outside that window, Dave, and goes, "General, have you ever heard of freedom of the press?" And then they come after him, and at that point I thought, yeah, I swear to you. At that point I thought, yeah, I'm quite glad that they never used that.
Yes. That is not good.
Have a look on YouTube, Dave. It's the worst line ever. Absolute worst line.
That is pretty poor.
Yeah, it is poor. But it's just, there's just different things. And like they say, he may have changed stuff if he'd been given full production time scale and to film it, because they obviously get changed, don't they? Different scenarios, but he could only use what he did to cut it into a film. But
yeah.
I'll never. I was going to buy it and stuff to sort of go and make Superman collection, and I was thinking I'm not going to buy it. It's just it's done. I've seen it. That's the line drawn as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So are you happy to go with your reviews and your review score, Dave?
Let's go with that. So I'm gonna go with a 4 out of 5 again. So for Superman 1, I did a 4 out of 5 capes, and I think I'm going right on the same again. Now, I know for a lot of people, this is one of those where the second movie, the sequel was better than the first. For a lot of people, I know probably yourself included.
Yeah.
For me, I have they're very different movies. The first one is clearly that origin story. The second one is much more into the action. But for me, I hold them in equal regard, I think. So I call the last one a 4 out of 5. I'm going same for this one.
Right. Oh, that's great. That, yeah. For this one, obviously, I give the first one a 3, but I'm going straight in on this, Dave. And maybe it is a bit of bias, but I'm going 5 out of 5.
Nice.
Because, like you say, and maybe it's because my origins of these sort of this media is always sort of around the action and stuff. I thought the first film did a good sort of building up of Superman, but this just had loads of set pieces. As much as we've had a bit of a laugh and a joke over the last few hours about what, little things we've picked up on, I just thought it was great. And one thing I didn't say before was when General Zod's on camera in that little town, and he says, like, is this being beamed to everyone around the world? And he sort of like preens himself and looks, and them little things make the film for me. So for me, it's a 5 out of 5 without doubt. I just thought everything built nicely. It was good pacing with it, and other than a couple of little things we picked up on, it's just one of my favourite films of all time in the superhero world.
Yeah, very good, very good. So our first 5 out of 5 then.
Yeah.
We'll have to probably keep track of these somehow, won't we?
Yeah, we'll do.
So, thanks for listening. If you want to email us, you can get in touch with us on comicsinmotionpodcast@gmail.com. You can also get us on Twitter at comicsinmotionp. And it'd be great if you've got any comments or questions about the show, you want to reminisce with us on the 2 movies that we've done so far. Maybe you've got some suggestions for us. That'd be absolutely great. We'd love to hear from you.
Oh, that's great. And also, me and Dave just want to do a quick plug for our own social media stuff. I've obviously got my own podcast, the Contextual Podcast, where you can contact me on Twitter, Facebook, I'm on iTunes at Contextual Podcast or at Contextual World. You can contact us on the contextualpodcast@gmail.com. And then, Dave, you've got your Coach Cast as well, if you want to give it a plug.
The Grassroots Coach Cast. We've just released our episode 6, where we're talking a bit more about the FA Level 1 course, and we actually go into it was quite a bit of fun this week to talk a little bit about the legendary Brian Clough. And so if you want to go out, head over and give that a listen. That was a bit of fun for us.
That's great. Well, so really good. So thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Dave, as always. That was
thank you.
Great episode, mate. Great episode. And then, we'll speak to you all next week. Take care.
Bye now.
Why do you say this to me when you know I will kill you for it?
Come to me, son of Jerome!